Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to get started. Okay, apologies for the delay in the start. Just we had a few items to work out before we started, and you'll hear a bit about those shortly. So first, regrets. Councillor Moffat has notified us that he will be absent from today's meeting. Declarations of interest.
Yes, Chair. I would like to declare interest on item number 1, the Sandy Hill Heritage Study Phase 2 Heritage Conservation Districts. I live in the proposed Heritage Conservation District, which is the Russell Range Road one, and consequently I feel that the perception, even though the advice to me was that I don't have to declare interest, I will in any case, because it's important for me to do that. So on that item, I will be absenting myself from the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, confirmation of minutes. Are those carried from 18th June 2018? Great. Okay, wonderful. Okay, we've got a few procedural items to add a couple of items to today's agenda, and I'm going to ask the Vice Chair to introduce the two motions now.
Does it matter which one I do first? No. Okay. This has to do with the application to demolish 488 500 Bank Street within the Centretown Heritage Conservation District. The motion is, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee approve the addition of this item for consideration by the committee at today's meeting pursuant to subsection 89.3 of the bylaw in order to allow this matter to rise to Planning Committee and Council in August 2018 and avoid further delays in the development of the site as previously approved by Council February 27, 2013.
So this is just a procedural motion at this stage. We'll get to the substance later. So on that motion, is that carried? Carried. Okay.
And the second motion has to do with the staff update on the McGee House, 1119 Wellington Street West, which has been in the press. My motion is, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee suspend Section 83(4)A of the procedural bylaw to receive an update from staff with respect to the McGee House, and dispense with the requirement of staff to provide a separate written report on this update so that the committee may receive a prompt update following the collapse of one of the building's walls on the 24th of July, 2018.
So is that good? Okay. Yeah. Great. Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Vestra.
Thank you.
So we'll add those two items to the end of our agenda as carried just now by the committee, which means we'll now move to the substantive portion of our agenda. We now have 4 items. Our first item is the Sandy Hill Heritage Study Phase 2, designation of the Russell Avenue Range Road and the Besser-Württemberg Street proposed Heritage Conservation Districts. So we're going to ask staff to provide us just with a brief outline of that item.
Great. Good morning, committee. So this item before you this morning is to present the sort of final product of the Phase 2 Sandy Hill Heritage Study, to present the proposed plans for the designation of the Russell Avenue Range Road and the Besser-Württemberg Heritage Conservation Districts. So just to give an idea of location where we're talking about this morning, the 2 districts are located just south of Rideau Street and along the Rideau River. And just to give a bit of context for the areas that we're looking at today, the districts are comprised of lands of the former Besserer and Bai estates. They encompass tree lines, streetscapes, and a number of representative examples of building types in Sandy Hill, which include small-scale apartment buildings, row houses, detached single-family dwellings, and a mix of architectural styles including Queen Anne Revival and Gothic Revival residences, and mid-20th century apartment designs. So just to give a bit of background on this project, in 1982, the city designated 5 heritage conservation districts. These are on the screen before you this morning in the bold outline. In order to address changes to the Ontario Heritage Act in 2005, the city initiated the Sandy Hill Heritage Study, and that was to look at the evaluation of properties in Sandy Hill and also to draft district plans for these 5 districts, which were not required under the Act prior to 2005. In 2015, the first part of the Heritage Study looked at mechanisms to protect other heritage resources in the area, and so in 2015, Council adopted the Sandy Hill Cultural Heritage Character Area, and that's in the dashed line on the screen before you, and that's a mechanism through the official plan. The character area is associated with design guidelines. So the Heritage Conservation District study areas, these are the study areas that were proposed out of the Phase 1. Initially, they included 3 different areas. You'll notice the first area is between Charlotte and over to the Rideau River. The second area was between Russell Avenue and Blackburn Avenue, and then the third area was Marlborough and Range Road. As part of the review of these areas, the city hired a consultant to undertake a further review of the Phase 1 study and to look at the evaluation of the properties. So as part of that review, the 2 districts south of Laurier were combined to form one large district, and the properties on Goulburn Avenue were added. And the district, the Besserer-Württemberg district, is slightly smaller than the study area to exclude a recent apartment building and townhouse complex on Fountain Place. So the Ontario Heritage Act includes a number of requirements for an HCD plan. These include a statement of objectives, a statement explaining the cultural heritage value of the conservation district, description of heritage attributes, as well as policy statements, guidelines, and procedures for achieving the stated objectives and managing change in the heritage conservation district, as well as a description of alterations or classes of alterations that are minor in nature. So both of the districts meet these requirements. They are very similar in nature, so I won't go through both separately, but these are the objectives in general for both of the districts: to conserve significant cultural heritage resources, ensure new development and site alterations, conserve the cultural heritage value, conserve and enhance and appreciate the cultural heritage values and attributes of the district, manage change, and provide guidance for ongoing maintenance and change so that the heritage attributes are retained. Each of the districts have a statement of cultural heritage value to reflect each of the conditions in the districts. It's essentially the foundation of the plan that outlines the reasons that the HCD is important, and this statement was written in collaboration with the working group. So for Russell Avenue and Range Road, the proposed district, the statement of cultural heritage value includes is noted for its well-conserved and tree-lined streetscapes that contain a variety of single-family dwellings and apartments, its association with the development of Sandy Hill and its home to civil servants and business people, as well as its architectural value as containing a mix of examples of Queen Anne Revival, Gothic Revival, and early to mid-20th century apartment designs. Just to go over a few of the heritage attributes in the Russell Range Road district: the dense tree canopies on Russell and Blackburn Avenue, the brick cladding with wood detailing on porches and verandas, the enhanced public realm features such as the wrought iron fences and the steeply sloping street gradients. Similarly, for the statement for Besserer-Württemberg, it's proposed for designation as a variant for the predominant development pattern of the former Besserer estate. Its well-conserved tree-lined streetscape containing many examples of small-scale apartment buildings, row houses, and detached dwellings, and its architectural value with a mix of architectural styles. And again, just a couple of the attributes: the early 20th century apartment buildings, dense tree canopies on Daly Avenue and Besserer Street, the substantial 2.5 to 3.5 story gabled roof residential buildings on narrow lots, and other significant landmark buildings such as the Polish Embassy on the screen before you. So the plan also outlines a number of policies and guidelines. The purpose of the policies and guidelines fulfill the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act, and they're meant to ensure the conservation of existing properties in the district. The policies are, they deal with general policies for the district at a higher level. They provide policies for contributing buildings and non-contributing properties, as well as new development, landscape and streetscape, and the regulatory process. So in general, those principles deal with conserving and maintaining the cultural heritage attributes and values of each of the properties in the district. It provides policies for property standards, as well as demolition of contributing buildings and non-contributing buildings, and notes that heritage attributes of landscape and streetscapes will be conserved and enhanced. The section on guidelines similarly is broken down between the conservation of contributing and non-contributing properties. It provides guidelines for additions and alterations to contributing and non-contributing properties, new construction, landscape, and the public realm. So under the Act, there's a requirement for a statutory public meeting, which will be the August 28th Planning Committee meeting, and as per the Heritage Act, all property owners have been notified of that meeting. Additionally, this project has benefited from a number of public consultation components. There was an open house in 2016, which was to kick off the project. Again, an open house in 2017, which was to present the draft plans and answer questions from owners. There were also 2 working group meetings in the spring of 2018 to undertake a detailed review of the plans, and an email postcard was sent to owners who attended the open house in 2016 as an additional opportunity to provide comments and raise any concerns. So the notification, as I mentioned, for these upcoming meetings was sent in July. Heritage Ottawa and Action Sandy Hill have also been notified. So as part of the consultation process and staff review that followed the working group meetings, there were changes made to the boundaries of the proposed Russell Avenue and Range Road HCD that exclude the former All Saints Church at 315 Chapel Street, as well as 452 and 454 Laurier East, which are the Egyptian Embassy properties. An official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment have been adopted for 315 Chapel Street to allow for the construction of a mixed-use building on the site. And Heritage staff worked very closely with the applicant during the planning process, leading up to the approval of these applications to ensure the cultural heritage value of the historic church was conserved. As Heritage staff worked with the applicant and the properties already designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act, and a heritage permit process already applies, this property was excluded from the boundary of the HCD. Additionally, during the development of the HCD plans, the Egyptian Embassy approached the city with plans to redevelop the properties at 452 and 454 Laurier East. Heritage and land use planners have been working with the Egyptian Embassy and its consultants for more than a year to ensure that the proposal would be compatible with the proposed district. The design for a new building will retain the building at 454 Laurier and construct an addition to it. And this has received the support of the city. And as a result of this prior consultation, the two properties owned by the embassy have been deliberately excluded from the boundaries of the Russell Avenue Range Road HCD to avoid further procedural delay with this redevelopment project. Staff have reviewed the plans against the provincial policy statement, the official plan, and the Heritage Act, and have determined that the proposed plans are consistent with these documents. Staff are recommending approval of the designation of the proposed districts and the adoption of the associated HCD plans, as they will help to further recognize, celebrate, and protect the important cultural heritage character of Sandy Hill. And should the plans be approved, staff are also recommending approval of an update to the Sandy Hill Cultural Heritage Character Area and its associated guidelines, as the new district would then be subject to their respective plans. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go straight to public delegations, and then there'll be a chance for questions and comments from members. So I've got speakers registered. The first speaker on my list is John Swetnam. So good morning and welcome to the subcommittee. You can have a seat here, and the way this works is public delegations have up to 5 minutes to speak. I'll give you a 30-second warning if you're still speaking at 4 minutes, 30 seconds. And over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a slide presentation, so I'll go to that. So the first picture on the slide is my house. I live on Russell Avenue. It is a detached single-family home. It is one of only 4 remaining detached single-family homes that are used for that purpose on the street. I feel that developments that have taken place, particularly on Russell Avenue, but within the Conservation District, really have changed the economic demands of use of properties in the area. I don't believe that for many of these homes, such as my own, that ongoing use of that home as a single-family home will be viable into the future. We have a particular case where I bought this house from my mother's estate. She had bought it in 1980. You can see it there. It was constructed in 1895. And both the house to the left of it and the house to the right of it are still used as single-family homes, and there's one other house on the street that's used for that purpose. But we've got, my partner and I, Constance, who's here, we've got 6 kids. She's got 3 and I've got 3. So this house kind of works for us. But it's very unlikely that trying to sell it, if we were to move, that anybody else would want to use a house that big for a single-family home. That means, can we go to the next slide, please? And we'll just skip that because that's my point. That means that it really needs to be used for a different purpose. Here you can see other buildings on that street. So 2 floors down from me is a very large, it's now in 12 apartments, where frankly I think it's horrible, but that's maybe beside the point. It's not in keeping. It doesn't look great. And I point out that part of the reason why residents go along with some of these developments when they come up is because everybody fears these homes being put to use as rooming houses. They need to be changed to be put to a good use, whether it's apartments or whether it's something else. It should be done in keeping, but we need some flexibility in order to make it viable. Another house there is also on Russell Kitty Corner in Osgood, and then around the corner, that large development for students. Next slide, please. So what I'm asking is some flexibility in the wording of the Conservation District rules. I'll call them rules. There's probably a different word. At the moment, it's worded such that properties are restricted to the use of the existing ridge line. Next slide, please. You can see here that's me, and my stepson's thumb in the picture, on the third floor of our home. I can't move around up there. I'm 6'2". That worked as a bedroom for me as a teenager, and it's worked as a bedroom for some of our kids now. But I think even kids now would find that room restrictive. It's not really viable for use unless you can go up a bit. And you can see the ridgeline of my house on the left. It's lower than the beautiful house next door to me, owned by Robert Zribi. And then you can see that new development much higher. I feel that there should be some flexibility to allow some wording that would say something like ridgeline in keeping with heritage nature of street, but not strictly existing ridgeline. Next slide, please. Also, in talking, loosely with my neighbor, Robert, who is going to be here today, we've talked about, would it make sense sometime maybe to combine our properties and develop it in some way that it could be nice apartments? And I do mean nice apartments to fit the objectives that you said about having business people and civil servants and stuff living in the neighborhood. To do that, we'd have to be allowed to join it. Next slide, please. So I note that your poster boy property on the cover of the Heritage Conservation District Plan document is a building that is two separate buildings that have been joined. I saw this happen because we've had the home in our family for a long time. It looks fine. I have some misgivings about the interior of that building, but that's different. At least on the outside, it seems to fit okay. Next slide, please.
Just to give you your 30-second warning.
30 seconds, real fast. Barry, I'm sorry you recused yourself from this because this is your development, and I think that living in the neighborhood means you really have more of a reason to be on this committee than to walk away, because I think you should be there saying you've got a real stake in it. Another infill that looks great, like joining the properties. Barry did a great job there. That's just across the street from this Heritage District in the Laurier Broad one. Next slide, please. And final point, just to say, I think that we'd really benefit, us folks who are still in the neighborhood and have single-family homes and have been there, you should give us some flexibility. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your intervention. Any questions for Mr. Swenning? No. Okay, that's great. Councillor Fleury, do you have a question? Staff arising from the delegation? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just a quick question on the presentation. I wonder, so staff is aware of this property specifically?
Yes, we are.
Okay, and then there were two recommended changes to our plan, but I want to understand that the property is not individually designated, which would allow those changes, but would require further oversight. Is that fair to say?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that would be fair to say all of the properties in the district are designated as within the boundary, but the guidelines, the policies and guidelines in the plan are flexible. They are intended to manage how these properties develop over time.
So you would, the objectives that were highlighted by the speaker in your mind could be achieved with obviously some criteria relating to materials and some of the exterior. Would that be fair to say?
I think that's correct.
Are we able for the previous speaker to just loop back and confirm in writing those statements, just so that, because right now we're sitting at committee and then obviously to bring some certainty or some clarity as per the policies, I'd love for the city to be able to provide the previous speaker with written clarification.
Yes, I think that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Any other questions arising from that public delegation? Maybe I have a quick one. Could staff just point us within the proposed AHCD plan the language around the ridgeline, because I wasn't able to find it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's in Section 8 with respect to the guidelines for alterations and additions. on page 41. The general guidelines for additions note that rear addition roof ridgeline height should not exceed the existing roof ridgeline.
I'm having trouble hearing you. Could you maybe just speak a bit louder? I didn't hear that.
Sorry. So it's on page 41 in the additions section. The rear addition roof ridgeline height should not exceed the existing roof ridgeline.
Got it. Thank you. I would note as well, just to further to Councillor Fleury's point, that the language there is should not. So for Mr. Swetnam as well, there are some provisions that deal with shall and some with should, and as Councillor Fleury elucidated, there is always the opportunity for applications to come forward to amend heritage properties, and staff would have that conversation with the applicant. Okay, we're going to go to our next speaker, which is David Fleming. Good morning and welcome to the subcommittee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is David Fleming. I'm the co-chair of the Advocacy Committee for Heritage Ottawa. I am pleased to speak to this motion, this matter. It's good to see 2 new heritage conservation districts coming in this neighborhood. My experience goes back to the dark old days of 2002 with the collapse of the group of Bean buildings, which resulted in a financial settlement which enabled a lot of the research to be done to create new heritage conservation districts. I think both reports are excellent, and they will help with the management and development of these crucial areas. You will know, of course, that there has been a number of development proposals for Sandy Hill, which really cry out for having clearer guidelines for the heritage characteristics of this neighborhood. Our only concern is the exclusion of 3 properties from the Russell Avenue Range Road one. We have no problem with 315 Chapel Street since an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw have been adopted. But we do have a problem with 452 and 454 Laurier Avenue East. It seems like this is a work in progress, and I can appreciate the fact that staff have been working with the owner with this. On page 7, it says the report has received the support of the city. I'm not quite sure what that means. Does that mean city staff have approved it in principle? It hasn't been approved by the city until council approves it. So I would propose that these 2 properties be put back into the district so that they can be considered fully under the Ontario Heritage Act as significant properties within the Heritage Conservation District. Thank you.
Okay, is that it?
Yep.
Any questions for Mr. Fleming? No, seeing none. Thank you very much for coming this morning. Okay, so we'll move to our final speaker, Tim Chatter. Did you want to speak, Mr. Chatter? No? Okay. So now it's time for questions and comments from members of the committee. Who wants to start? Questions to staff? No? Did you? Okay. Member Clinton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I just wanted to congratulate the staff on 2 excellent reports. I thought they were very well prepared, very thorough, and as our previous speaker said, it's great to see 2 new heritage conservation districts in this important historic neighborhood in our city. But I do also would like to follow that up by asking about 452 and 454 Laurier Avenue East. the properties that have been, at the last minute, I might add, removed from the boundaries of the Russell Conservation District. So could you elaborate on the reasons for that, please?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. As I mentioned in the presentation, during the development of the HCD plans, the embassy did approach the city with plans to redevelop this site. And we have been working closely with the embassy to come to a design that would be compatible with the district. And we did make a commitment to the embassy that this design would be supported. And as a result, these properties were excluded from the boundary to allow that project to proceed without further delay.
So how long has this relationship been underway, and when did the city make that commitment to the embassy?
As I understand, we've been working with the embassy for more than a year.
So the boundaries as presented during the various community meetings, community consultation meetings, public meetings, right up until the spring 2008 meeting with the working group, I understand the boundaries presented to the public included these two buildings. Am I correct?
That is correct.
So isn't that a little disingenuous if you've been working with the embassy for a couple of years and have known about this agreement with them for some time?
I'll take that one. We've been working with the embassy for quite some time, probably a year, on details. We didn't resolve the design of this plan until more recently. I hear your point. We could have potentially flagged it a little bit earlier to the community in the last session, but until the design was to a point where we were comfortable, we didn't want to raise that.
So basically what the city is proposing is allowing the embassy to proceed on a plan that will likely include the demolition of the smaller house and a rehabilitation in addition to the Tudor property that anchors the corner, a really critical corner, Laurier Avenue East and Range Road, opposite the park, Strathcona Park. And basically this is going to allow this development to proceed without the owners having to come before the Built Heritage Subcommittee or Planning Committee. So I guess some concern about what is it about the project that you feel would make it would put the project at risk if the owner had to bring it before the Built Heritage Subcommittee for consideration under the guidelines.
Thank you. Through Mr. Chair, I just wanted to add that these properties are still located within the Sandy Hill character area, so they would be subject to the design guidelines through that mechanism. The official plan and the proposed HCD plans also have policies for adjacency, so there would be a cultural heritage impact statement that would be required for any future proposals on this site.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fleury.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you for those questions. I want to go back for a second. So we are working on a live application from the Egyptian Embassy, and I understand that. We've been privy to those conversations. Just before we go into the HCD conversation, where are we at with that application? So I believe it meets the zoning. It's currently being reviewed by heritage and planning staff, and it would require a site plan. Now, as part of that, we've asked for some engagement with the community and meeting with Action Sandy Hill and so on. So where are we in that process? I believe that there is some continued work on the design that didn't necessarily enable a follow-up with the community, but I want to make sure that we're not missing the window where the site plan is too advanced that before there's a community touch point. So just in terms of clarity because I do think that it factors into the HCD conversation, is where we're at in the application. At what point can we engage? Because I know there's been an initial touch point with ASH, but when can we go back to the community association? And when do we expect the site plan to be brought? I don't like to use the word finalized, because I could always pull delegated authority. And this is not a threat. This is just in terms of process. But I'd like to just know where we're at.
Through you, Mr. Chair. My understanding is that the building permits and the demolition permit has been submitted for this proposal, but the site plan application is forthcoming. As I understand, the applicant intends to submit that in the fall.
So we're waiting for their submission to be able to set out a date with Action Sandy Hill and proceed in those engagement?
That would be correct.
Okay. Thank you. So now on the HCD front, I'm not sure that I understand. So if these properties were included in the HCD, what would be the change to the process that we just highlighted? And in my mind, I'm not sure that I see one, and maybe I'm confused as part of the review. So if we were, just to clarify my question, if we were to have those two sites, which are the Egyptian Embassy, included in the HCD today, what would that change?
Mr. Chair, so if the properties were included in the HCD boundary, they would be subject to the heritage permit process. So they would go through a full permit. It would come to this committee for consideration through planning committee and to council for final approval. So considering how far along in the design process the applicant is, it was just determined to leave them out of the boundary for that reason.
Okay, so I understand from a demolition point of view, and I think the applicant and the city are well advanced in terms of demolition of one of the properties, but protection of the eastern one, the one that's at Range and Laurier. But in terms of the characteristics, the guidelines that you highlighted in your presentation, how does one influence the other, and wouldn't that be one of the tools or the lens for the city's review for this application?
It's fair to say that through this process with the proponents that we took the existing official plan policies and directions on heritage, and we also knew we were working on a draft HCD, and we put that lens to it through the process from a staff perspective. And so we're quite comfortable with the proposal that's before us from that perspective, given the fact that it's not in an HCD today.
So just to pursue this, so I know we're working in good faith with the applicant. We have a path forward, if you will, on the protection of one of the site and the connection of the both sites. I get those conversations. In the context where we have a stalemate with the applicant, and I don't foresee that, because it seems to have really been going back and forth and working well in adjusting to the requests from the city, the community. But if we were, wouldn't we protect the city a little more in including it in the HCD, relating to some of our guidelines and standards for the overall community? That's where I get confused. Is like right now we're working in good faith, and we believe that most of the issues will be resolved as part of that process. In the instance where something were to happen and there'd be a difference, then wouldn't have those properties included in the HCD give us a strong policy base to propose our side of the story.
I think we've been working very cooperatively with the proponents. They've been very receptive to any changes that we've requested. We've gone through quite a process to get to the stage that was here before you today. They will certainly tweak and change things through the site plan process as we go through that. It would be really throwing it back and saying you now have to go through a new bureaucratic process of heritage permit, which is Build Heritage Subcommittee, Planning Committee, and Council, that they don't have to do today. So that's the issue.
Okay. Maybe we can get just a final clarity as per would the standards of the guidelines and character of the community hold in policy, even if it's not included in the HCD for that specific property? I'm inventing here because I don't know which elements of the guidelines in terms of the cultural heritage character area. But if it is, like, let's say red brick, for example, I'm using a very broad term, but if it's red brick that speaks to the character and the applicant says, no, we're not doing red brick, then wouldn't it help if it was in the HCD?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think if I understand your question, the proposed design, it would meet the character area guidelines, but the district plan policies and guidelines would be a bit more strict.
So I guess that's my point. Like, is there a way? I recognize there's a live application for which we took a lot of effort in proceeding, and again, I am very confident we can get to a final resolution. And I don't want to get caught up in, staff have done some work, the applicant has done some work. We don't want to reinitialize a process. But at the same time, today the committee is asked to have a broad range of additional lenses and policies that protect the character of this area. And I feel it's odd that those same goals wouldn't apply in policy to that application. So is there a way forward that we can ensure that those policies apply to that property without catching it on the demolition side? So, Mr. Chair, I don't know if you had...
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of ideas, and I think there is an awkwardness that I think we need to acknowledge insofar as the applicant had, as of right, the ability to demolish both properties when they started this process a year ago or however long ago that was. And the awkwardness we're in now is staff who, of course, did not want particularly East property demolished, engaged in a discussion with the applicant to try and ensure that that building could be saved. And I think, sort of what I'm understanding as the unspoken bargain was they would proceed on that basis, and the idea now, having submitted their demolition permit for the west side property, that they would have to start all over again, wouldn't be fair in terms of the process that we've had up until now. I think, however, having said that and having some understanding of that, I think to get to Councillor Fleury's point, there is a way around this in two ways, I think. The first is I see no reason why the properties could not be added to the boundaries of the Heritage Conservation District after this application is completed. So once the buildings are done and everything is up and running, I think for the next generations of heritage planners and members of the BHSC, there would be very little rationale in having that little carve out. So in speaking to Member Smallwood about this before, I can say on his behalf that he's going to put forward a motion in a few moments proposing that we add those two properties to the boundaries of the Heritage Conservation District upon completion of this particular application. The second thing, I was a little bit surprised by staff's answer to Councillor Fleury's question about whether or not this application would satisfy the guidelines of the Heritage Conservation District Plan, were it to be subject to it, which it's not. And I was surprised to hear that. I think the answer was no. And I would say, again, without wanting to upset the apple cart and knowing that the applicant is here in the audience, in the weeks and months ahead, surely effort should be made as far as possible to make sure that this application, which we understand is well through and well involved in a process, should, as far as possible, respect the policies which we're about to apply for the rest of that district. So that would be maybe staff direction, maybe more of an informal appeal to both the applicant and staff to make sure that there is comfort there. Sorry,
I believe Mr. Kuhn wants to say something.
Chair, if I could jump in here, I apologize if there was confusion on your second point there. Certainly, as Mr. Collins said, we have been working with the applicant on the last year in tandem with development of the HCD guidelines to ensure that this does meet the HCD policies. There are policies within the HCD and then the OP that speak to adjacency and the need for any properties that are on the borderline of the Heritage Conservation District to be obedient with the HCD policies, and in this case, being on the proposed borderline, it surely is and definitely is in compliance with the future HCD. Okay, that's very important clarification. Thank you. Can I ask Member Smallwood to introduce his motion, just because we're on this topic right now?
So the motion would be as followed. Whereas report ACS 2018 PIE RHU 0019 and document 3 exempt the Embassy of Egypt property at 452 and 454 Laurier Avenue East from the boundary of the proposed Russell Avenue Range Road Heritage Conservation District, and whereas the owner applied for building permits last year to demolish the two-story attached dwelling at 452 Laurier Avenue East and construct an addition to the Category 2 building at 454 Laurier Avenue East, and whereas the development is also subject to the site plan control and the building permits will not be issued until an application has been submitted and an agreement has been registered, and whereas the property is being exempt from the proposed district to allow the development to proceed, and whereas Heritage staff have worked and will continue to work with the owners through the building permit and site plan control processes to ensure compatibility with the proposed district. Therefore, be it resolved that the Build Heritage Subcommittee recommend that the Planning Committee recommend that Council amend the staff report to include the following recommendation. Council direct staff, upon completion of construction on 452 and 454 Laurier Avenue East, in accordance with the approved site plan agreement, to pass a bylaw amending the Russell Avenue Range Road Heritage Conservation District to include the properties.
And so is that, I hope that's clear to everyone. So the idea would be that after this building is constructed, staff would go ahead and amend the bylaws to erase that notch in the HCD plan. And what that would mean is, from that point onward, the building at 454 would have protection under Part 5 in a way that it currently would not. So that's the purpose of that motion. Member Quinn.
I'm just wondering if we could strengthen that by imposing a time limit on when that designation would happen.
Are you worried that in a case where it sits there for 5 years that there wouldn't be a designation? I don't know. I'm open to the idea of legal or court. Do you have any thoughts on how to manage that? Chair, my understanding in speaking with the applicant the last week is that their intentions are to as Ms. Kim said, to bring forward their building permit site plan application this fall. Working with Councillor Fleury's office, we can certainly want to add, facilitate a community open house or any type of public engagement the Councillor desires as well. The applicant has also informed me that they intend to vacate the property as well, so we do believe this project will be moving forward. That being said, if committee would want to impose a timeline of I would say 2 years, that's what I was thinking, then that I think would be appropriate.
Could that amendment take place?
Okay, so we'll add, can I see the...
Could I suggest something like which it would be applied within the HCD at the earliest either completion date or to a maximum of, and then put the date, right? So then we don't confuse the intent.
Just for the sake of ease, what if we just said no later than 24 months from the date of council approval? No later than 24 months. Okay. Of the approval of the Heritage Conservation District. Okay. So we'll just leave that just to allow for any other questions or comments. Okay, so wrap up. Councillor Fleury.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais premièrement remercier la Ville. Je pense qu'il y a un travail qui a été démontré ces dernières années pour faire une réflexion réelle sur les zones qui sont importantes de garder dans notre ville, tout particulièrement ici dans la Côte-de-Sable. On a 5, comme ce qui a été présenté par Mackenzie, on a 5 zones dans la Côte-de-Sable qui sont bel et bien protégées, qui reflètent bien le caractère souhaité. Puis on a vu des applications qui ont modifié certaines propriétés, mais qui ont reflété les buts de chacune de ces zones-là à l'intérieur de ces zones-là. L'effort qui a été fait ces dernières années pour faire l'analyse de ces 2 zones-ci, qui sont une au sud de Laurier, entre Osgood et Laurier, et puis l'autre tout près de la rue Rideau, près de la rivière, ont été faites de façon très particulière. Ils ont regardé la zone, ils ont vraiment trouvé une zone qui valait la peine de protéger. Ça protège pas l'ensemble de la communauté, mais ça protège les éléments qui ont une valeur particulière. Donc pour ça, j'implore vraiment le travail qui a été accompli. I really think that these additional 2 zones, the Besserer-Württemberg and the Russell Range one, are really good in adding 2 very valuable sections of Sandy Hill to the 5 existing ones that have shown to protect the character of the community. There are within those zones individually designated property which have additional protection. And then, as we heard from one of the speakers today, there is continued willingness to continue to improve properties within those future areas and within existing areas. So now there are criteria that are in place that can help and the city and any property owners to continue to improve their property, but at the same time protect the overall character of Sandy Hill itself. So I'm quite favorable to it. We saw a few months ago the All Saints property that was properly handled and reviewed by this committee, but also by the staff. And then obviously it's good to bring to public record the efforts of city staff and the applicant relating to the Egyptian embassy. I'm confident that we are going to see something that will be supported and by the applicant, and by the community, and by the city relating to that specific site. So I want to thank the community, I want to thank the city. I think that these 2 additional zones are important. They are an effort of the city to protect the valuable assets, the built form assets that we have in a community like Sandy Hill, and I would encourage other neighborhoods to continue to do the same. We've had, as I said in French, 5 existing zones that have worked very well for Sandy Hill, and adding those to continue to add to the contribution of the neighborhood in meaningful ways. They don't stop development, but they do support the overall character of the community, and they do set key parameters for the city or any property owner as we come forward to see some of those properties, that would be porches, that would be some of the ridge lines as we talked about, or some of the various opportunities that might rest in different streets. So I think it sets a fair balance, and at the same time sets a real good tone for the additional zones that need to be protected in a historic neighborhood like Sandy Hill. So I want to thank the committee for the review of this report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're just finalizing Member Smallwood's motion on amending the boundaries, so just give us 30 seconds here. Okay, so we've got a slightly amended motion just to deal with the timeline issue. Therefore, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee recommend the Planning Committee recommend the Council amend the staff report to include the following recommendation. Council directs staff within 24 months of the issuance of all required building permits with respect to 452 and 454 Laurier Avenue East to pass a bylaw amending the Russell Avenue Range Road Heritage Conservation District to include the properties. Sandy, well done. So first, on Member Smallwood's motion, is that carried? Okay. And then the amended motion, is that carried? Carried. Okay, great. Thank you, everybody. So now we're going to move on to our next substantive item, which is 114 Richmond Road, an application to alter the former Sisters of the Visitation Monastery, 114 Richmond Road, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. So we're going to ask staff to open this item with a short presentation, and then we have speakers registered on this item.
Okay. Great. So this is an application for alteration under Part 4 of the Heritage Act at 114 Richmond Road. The subject property is located on the south side of Richmond Road between Byron Avenue to the south, Wheaton Terrace on the east, and Hilson Avenue to the west. The subject site is set behind the recently constructed 9-story condominium building to the north section, which is along Richmond Road, visible through a number of archways at the ground floor of the condo building. So this property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act for its cultural heritage value as a large-scale former monastery comprising a historic house, a chapel, and 3 wings that house the cloistered order of the Sisters of the Visitation between 1908 and 2010. These are some historic photos of the property. The original 2.5-story stone house was built in 1864, between 1864 and 1865, to designs purchased by Sidney Bowles Fripp in the Gothic Revival style. It was one of a number of Gothic villas on large lots along Richmond Road that were built for members of Ottawa's emerging elite. In 1910, the property was sold to the Sisters of the Visitation, which was a cloistered order from France, whose members devoted their lives to prayer. And the house was converted into the monastery starting in 1911, with the addition of 4 wings and the chapel, which was completed in 1913. And soon after, the high walls were constructed encircling the entire property to protect the privacy of the residents. The subject property was designated in 2010, and the full statement of cultural heritage value has been included as part of the report. But I'll just note a few of the significant attributes of the site. The attributes of the stone house include its steeply pitched roof with narrow gable-roofed dormers, the east-facing veranda, the decorative archboard, stone coins and voussoirs, and the interior central staircase. The attributes of the monastery include its 2-story stone construction, the pattern of flower beds within the central courtyard, the high-hipped metal-clad roof with gable and triangular dormers, the bell-cot inward-facing plan with wings arranged around the central courtyard that's enclosed on all 4 sides, and the chapel with its interior volume and pointed arch windows. The grounds, the large verandas and remnants of gardens within the property are also included in this statement, as a portion of the sisters' daily life was devoted to outdoor recreation within these spacious outdoor areas. So just a bit of background, the applicant previously submitted a proposal which included an office building that was proposed in the center of the courtyard. This was not supported by staff, as it would have resulted in the loss of a significant portion of the heritage fabric and negatively impact the cultural heritage value of the site. This application before the committee today is for a new 9-story above-grade addition to the existing monastery and the adaptive reuse of the interior of the remaining structure, as well as the restoration of the historic elements of the building. This is the site plan showing the location of the proposed scope of work associated with the application. The proposal is part of a larger complex which will eventually consist of 2 additional buildings on the site. The project includes the adaptive reuse of the site for a combination of what's intended to be restaurant space within the chapel and the historic house, bed and breakfast use within the east and north wings, as well as condominiums in the L-shaped building. The proposal includes a request to remove the southern half of the west wing and the entire 1-story south wing in order to construct the L-shaped addition to the former monastery, as well as raising the courtyard to align with the first floor of the original building. Beneath the L-shaped building in the raised courtyard, there will be 2 levels of parking. In addition to the removal of the wings, the internal facing dormer windows will be removed and replaced by a long contemporary dormer to light the attic of the attic story of the historic building. In terms of restoration, the key heritage attributes of the former monastery will be restored, including the existing tin roof and the remaining original windows, the bellcot, the barge board, and the stone walls. The gable dormers on the outside roof slope will be restored, and new sympathetic windows will be inserted where the originals had been replaced. The historic veranda of the house, as well as the long verandas constructed as part of the monastery, will also be rehabilitated. The remaining historic windows and interior spaces of the historic house will also be restored, and a few of the interior elements are on the screen today. The interior spaces are proposed to be renovated and converted to a restaurant use, but the interior plan will remain intact. This proposal includes a 9-story addition to be located to the south of the historic monastery, between the monastery and the development plan to the south, on the remainder of the vacant parcel. The addition will be clad in smooth dressed stone and masonry to complement the rough cut stone of the former monastery on the lower 6 floors, whereas the upper recessed floors will be primarily glazed. The proposed building has a combination of recessed and projecting balconies, and the southeast corner is set on columns to allow for a fire route. The proposed addition will be connected to the former monastery by a 2-story glass link. It's 2.4 meters wide, which serves to clearly demarcate the transition from the old building to the new building. From here, the proposed building steps back from 4 stories to 6 and to 9 at its maximum height. The removal of the 1-story south wing means that the proposed interior courtyard will not be fully enclosed. However, a 1-story stone wall to be built of reclaimed stone from the west wing will be located on the footprint of the former south wing to create a sense of enclosure. Additionally, the lower 2 stories of the west interior wall will be constructed of salvaged stone as a visual reminder of the space's former character. The distinctive pattern of the flower beds of the historic courtyard will be recreated in the new courtyard, and when a planting plan is developed for the courtyard gardens, a separate heritage permit under delegated authority will be issued. Leading from Byron Avenue towards Richmond Road, the proposed addition is accessible to pedestrians through a colonnade between the future buildings at the south. The image at the top of the screen shows the reclaimed stone wall connecting the old and new courtyards, and the bottom image shows the colonnade. So staff have reviewed this proposal against Parks Canada's standards and guidelines. I won't go into them in detail, but the applicable standards and guidelines for this proposal are on the screen before you. Staff are satisfied that the proposal generally respects the standards and guidelines by conserving the heritage place, finding an appropriate new use for this important property, and sensitively locating a distinct and appropriately designed addition to the complex. A cultural heritage impact statement was prepared as part of this application, which noted a number of positive aspects of the proposal, including the retention of 80% of the heritage resource, the preservation of the historic house and its character-defining elements, and the retention of much of the interior, as well as the notion of the enclosed courtyard. The aspect of providing access for members of the community is also noted as an important benefit of this proposal. The CHIS included a number of recommendations, including the thoughtful design of connections between new and existing, and careful detailing of the step-back section of the addition. Staff were able to work with the applicant to widen the proposed glass connection at the junction of the monastery and the addition. And furthermore, staff worked with the applicant to reinstate the profile of the hip roof of the west wing at the connection of the new addition. Additional tree planting to buffer the development from the residential area on Meaton Terrace was also introduced as a result of the discussions with the applicant. Robert Martin, whose office prepared the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement, is here today and may be able to answer more specific questions with respect to the content of the CHIS. So just to conclude, staff support the partial removal, restoration, and alterations in new construction at 114 Richmond Road, as the work comprises the retention and restoration of quite a large part of the historic monastery, chapel, and historic house, which are heritage attributes. The courtyard garden will be recreated, and the link between the old and new buildings will be sensitively designed, and the new building will be stepped back. The stone transition wall and the lower stories of the interior west wall will be constructed using salvage stone of the former west wing. So staff recommends the approval of the application to alter the Sisters of the Visitation Monastery through the removal of the sections outlined herein, conditional upon the digital recording of portions of the buildings to be removed for deposit at the City of Ottawa Archives. Staff recommend approving the application to restore the historic portions of the building and approving the application for new construction, conditional upon the issuance of 2 permits through delegative authority for the restoration of the front veranda and the landscaping for the courtyard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. We're going to go straight to our public delegations, and then there'll be time for questions and comments. So we have 6 speakers registered. First we have Linda Hode, followed by David Sheens. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our views on this very, very important heritage designation. As you will have read in our submission, Heritage Ottawa strongly opposes demolition of the West Wing. We base this in part upon a 2010 peer review panel which was established by the Planning Department prior to the construction of the buildings on Richmond Road, which suggested any height of the building to the south should be distanced from the convent. The current zoning bylaw actually reinforced this recommendation by creating a no-build zone between the designated building and the 9-story building to the south, which was permitted in the zoning bylaw. The short arm of the L shape of the new construction extends beyond both the footprint and the building envelope of the existing wing it proposes to replace. It's totally out of scale with the existing building and extends the 9-story component to the north beyond the area that had been zoned for 9 stories in the zoning bylaw. We recommend that or suggest a greater and more distinct separation is required between the existing building and any proposed addition or construction to the site. We find that the alignment of the 9-story residential module is protrudes too far west. We support the CHIS recommendation to reduce that. We recommend that the west elevation of the 9-story building be aligned with the existing west face of the chapel. This would reduce its mass considerably. We also would like to recommend a more explicit yet discrete connection to differentiate new construction from existing and to allow the monastery to continue to read as a separate building. It is, we feel, overwhelmed by the proposed building and especially that connection of the L connection to the existing building. So, in short, we are opposed to the demolition of the west wing, and we recommend significant design refinements to the 9-story building with the objective of minimizing the impact of its form and massing on the existing heritage building. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the submission. Any questions from Ms. Head? Councillor Leeper?
Really quickly, Linda, when I take a look at the north elevation, so that gives me the face of the front of the convent, and I get a view of what is on either side. That western extension beyond the building envelope of the convent seems pretty minimal. I'm just trying to understand the discomfort there. I certainly understand the discomfort with the rest of it. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm looking at. Is that a meaningful difference between the faces of the buildings?
I think, given the massing, it is. It pushes the heritage building too much. It really imposes itself on it. So it's partly the extension to the west, but more specifically the height.
Yeah. So if it were to extend a little bit, and I hope between now and planning committee we might be able to reduce the bulk of that extension from the previously approved 9-story into this one. I just want to make sure that you would be comfortable if there was a little bit of an extension, that's not overly problematic for you.
I would say that the destruction and intrusion into the existing building of the modern building is, of course, the biggest issue, but it's also the height of that extension, which I think, it's hard to picture, I must say.
I want to understand from the architects and the proponents from whom I know will hear why they're proposing so much density with respect to that extension into the convent. Are there trade-offs here for finally having a plan that will preserve the convent versus additional density? Is there any trade-off with which Heritage Ottawa can live if you are convinced of the necessity?
We certainly do appreciate the work the staff was able to do to bring this forward. The plan we saw in January was certainly much less appropriate. And so it would be, as I say, there's a lot that would have to be changed, I think, to make us feel comfortable with this. But we do appreciate that the building itself will be restored, and I guess I forgot to mention here, although you are not dealing with the holding zone, a holding zone is proposed in the zoning bylaw amendment that will be coming forward to Planning Committee at the same time as this goes to Planning Committee, and we'll certainly be there to support it. The holding zone is to ensure that work on this building, the Heritage Building, is begun before any extensive work is done on the 9-story part. So that's a big improvement over the existing situation. I don't know that I can commit Heritage Ottawa to anything specific, but it's that it needs to be pushed back and more of a more sensitive transition between the Heritage Building and the 9-story building is what we would look for.
A connection between those two buildings, however, because if I understand why this is viable is with respect to connecting the HVAC, a connection between the buildings.
Well, that connection could have been made at replacement of the one-story or two-story part that is being demolished, and we don't have a problem with that. But that would have offered another opportunity, I think, to connect the HVAC. I guess I did mention at one point in discussions with Heritage Ottawa, I think there's been a successful integration of a high-rise building behind the Bethany Hope Centre on Wellington Street. There's a separation, I don't know what the distance is, but it's a considerable separation. There is a link, but it does not exceed the limit of the roof line of the Heritage Building. So although the building is I think it's 16 stories, it's set back enough from the Bethany Hope Centre that it doesn't seem to completely overwhelm it.
Okay. Thanks, Linda. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you for coming out this morning. Next on our list is David Jeans, and he will be followed by Bob Smith.
I have a presentation, so you need to close that presentation. I have a presentation. And I need that slide changer. Yeah, that's good. Which is the changer? Okay, good. Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting as an individual because I've been personally involved with this building. I've lived in Kitchissippi for 44 years and contributed to the designation of 3 Westboro landmarks, Maison Jeanne d'Arc, the Visitation Monastery, and Broadview School. I've studied and toured the entire building here. I identified the architect of the 1864 house and was a party to the Conservation Review Board hearing, contributing to the Statement of Cultural Heritage Value. This picture shows the key areas of the buildings which I'll discuss. The 1864 house in orange, the 1913 monastery in gray, part of which is to be demolished, the corridor around the courtyard in turquoise, evoking a monastic cloister, much of which will be demolished, and the chapel and nuns' choir in red, which was actually a Gothic-style addition. The veranda porch and balcony are in yellow. The house, built originally for James Dyke by architect Sidney Fripp and owned by a series of prominent businessmen, has Gothic features that will be preserved, though the original Gothic porch shown here will not be recreated, and the very distinctive Gothic front door is not mentioned. The house has a distinctive pinwheel plan originating in England and seen in a number of stone villas around Ottawa. Each wing radiates around a large central stair hall, of which this is one of the finest examples. The plan to preserve the interior for use as a restaurant can be compared to what has been done successfully at Maple Lawn and Carbatos in Stittsville. The 1913 monastery was built without the chapel and without any Gothic features, as seen in this postcard, but the blueprints below showed the chapel and adjoining nuns' choir as a Gothic addition, probably in 1919. Preservation of these Gothic windows, doors, cross, the bellcot, etc. is important. The heritage-designated interior volume of the chapel is proposed to become a restaurant, but there are 3 other large main floor spaces used by the nuns that may also remain intact as restaurant or resident amenity spaces. This would aid future interpretation of the monastic life. They are here the refectory or dining room, the nuns' choir, and the nuns' community room. Basement spaces such as the laundry and root cellar may also find new uses, such as a gym. The patterned courtyard and the walls surrounding it are designated as a significant monastic feature, though the court is to be raised to main floor level and a substantial part of the enclosing wall and corridor is to be demolished. I would like to see recovered stone used not only in the new west wall as proposed, but also to indicate both sides of the original south corridor, even if only with a low wall. The configuration of the monastery relates to an earlier monastery now lost on West Wellington, formerly Richmond Road, for the Capuchin monks at St. Francis of Assisi Church. This may also suggest that church's architect, Charles Brodeur, was also architect of the Visitation Monastery and or the chapel, but it also represents the important history of convents and monasteries all over Ottawa.
In the development so far, some important public views have been preserved as shown in red on this diagram, and these must continue to be protected. Quickly from the west across the schoolyard, though this includes, outlined in red, the part to be demolished, from the Nuns Walk from the southeast, two views from the west archway from Richmond Road, a view from the east archway, and from the driveway at Leighton Terrace. However, this last view was to be compromised by the new building looming over it, which with its west wing out of scale with the monastery, according to the CHIS. And this has already happened with some views from the south, as you see here. I do not see why the desired floor space could not have been achieved within the footprint of the building for which the zoning was already approved, which is outlined here in red at the bottom. This would have allowed a lower height intrusion into the southwest corner of the monastery. Even better, the southwest monastery wing could have been retained or reconstructed to preserve the historic configuration of the monastery in relation to its courtyard and surroundings. In summary, this building should be treated as a Westboro landmark and its largest heritage building. Through James Skeed, it links to the founding of Westboro as Skeed's Mills. It's part of the sequence of heritage buildings along West Wellington and Richmond Road, which was once all in Nepean and all Richmond Road. The monastery portion also represents the formation of the Roman Catholic presence in the West End, including the founding of St. George's Parish in 1923, and the first stop on the famous visit to Ottawa of the venerated statue of Notre Dame de Cap during the huge Marian Congress of 1947. While many elements of the plan preserve important spaces and features in new uses, it's still a disappointment to lose a substantial part of the 1913 monastic building and the cloister-like corridor with its doors to the courtyard on all four sides. Thank you.
Wow, that was impressive. And with 5 seconds to spare.
I've spent a lot more than 5 minutes on this building, I can tell you.
Yeah. Can you, David, go back to your second last slide where you showed the footprint?
This one with the intrusion, or?
No, where you made the argument that...
Oh, yeah. Well, the original, I've shown the outline in red dashed at the bottom, which is taken from the previously presented plan, which I believe is the approved zoning, and it has different numbers of floors going up to 9 stories, but contained within that red dashed line. And as you can see, the footprint of the new building is a bit narrower than that, and I'm just wondering why that small number of additional suites, which you can see, which are outside the red dotted line on the left-hand side, are needed if the amount of floor space, the same amount of floor space, could have achieved within the footprint for which they already have zoning approval.
Sorry, so you're arguing the red square, the red dotted line you're saying is existing zoning?
Yeah, that was the previous zoning approval for the building south of the monastery. As you can see, it was not aligned with the monastery. It was actually aligned with the other buildings and with Byron Avenue. And so what's happened here is that this building, in addition to being extended on the west side to replace that part of the monastery, has also been rotated slightly, so it closes in the space between the new building and the monastery a little bit.
So you are making the argument that if you could have your druthers, you would have liked to have seen the application absorb more of the space within the red rectangle with a lower height?
In order to either lower the heights a bit more or even not have to replace that portion of the west wing of the monastery.
So to be provocative, you don't think much of Heritage Ottawa's concerns with the western protrusion beyond the Chapel Faith?
Well, I hadn't referred to that. I'm in support of the Heritage Ottawa position, and it's also the position of the CHIS that this addition is out of scale with the monastery, and particularly where it touches it. You can see on this plan that the building does extend beyond the line of the chapel. If you draw a line down from the chapel, you'll see there's a fair chunk of the new building which projects beyond that line.
Well, I get that, but I don't understand. Aren't you contradicting yourself? On the one hand, you're saying take up the red rectangle, but at the same time you're saying, but don't protrude west of the chapel.
I think it's a different question because the original red line was an entirely separate building, not connected to the monastery. And I think the point made by Linda was that it's because this building is intimately connected to the monastery, albeit with that 2 and a bit meter wide glass gap where the join is, that it still is to be viewed very much as a piece of the monastery, particularly when you're looking from the views from the west.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Jeans? Seeing none, I want to thank you, and I want to thank you because clearly that was a lot of work to put that presentation together, and I thought it was very helpful and elucidating, so thank you for that. Okay, next speaker on our list is Bob Smith, to be followed by Lauren Cutler. Good morning and welcome. And you two will have 5 minutes to speak.
Robert Smith, and I'm an owner resident of the existing QS development. I'm also a practicing architect. I'd like to present two arguments. One is the increase in density in the site, and one is the process that we're going through right now. In some levels, I actually support the application as it's presented. I think the adaptive reuse of the monastery is commendable. I think the connecting masses in some ways gives it a more complex and layered and interesting development. I think the preservation of historic elements, aside from the Widow's Walk, is actually commendable. I do have a problem with the fact that this application is outside the permitted zoning application, in that it's a significant increase in the density. The areas in red that I've shown here shows the increase in density that's being proposed. There is no application for this density increase. There's been no public consultation or circulation or discussion, and there's been no zoning schedule that's submitted with the application. My real fear moving forward with this application is that granting this approval now will give a fait accompli in planning or rezoning applications. It's really a cart before the horse scenario, and I believe that we'll be baking in the increased density on this site. I really see in the area to the west here, there is really no justification for this increased density at all with the application. This area here where we're building over the existing monastery was given at the public consultation meeting, was required to provide services to the monastery. That's partly not true. It's basically, in my mind, a zoning and land grab backed by the applicant. The Heritage Act guidelines, section 4321, noted in the report, discusses the importance of mirroring the masses of the two structures, and I pretend that this does not mirror the two masses at all. In fact, this application exacerbates this feature. When this area was brought up for public discussion at the public meeting, the notion of increased mass was literally denied by the applicant in public, as well as the justification for servicing HVAC systems was presented as justification. The applicant is actually using this technique in this whole, this is the zoning schedule that's approved for the site. This is the increase in mass in the center, is the increase in density that's being proposed, and this is the increase in density in the top left-hand corner, and the center section of the red bars is the increase in density proposed. in the overall site, it's hard to see in this site, but in the center of the area, designated in A, is a 30% increase in the density proposed. B is the top center section, which is the increase in height that's being proposed. C is the increase in the four-story limitations on the site. D is the increase from 4-story to 6 stories, and E is the increase from 4 to 5, or possibly, arguably 6 stories. So the applicant is making applications to increase the density of the site in all phases, and this is our residents' main problem with this application. You'll see the big arrow in the center left-hand side of the site. That is where the parking and the vehicular access will be directing headlights directly into the existing residential units, which is a whole separate issue. That's it for my... I do have two recommendations, sorry.
Mr. Smith?
Yes?
You've got 30 seconds.
Okay, I do have two recommendations to the committee, and that is that if they agree to this type of proposal, that the increased density of this aspect be offset against any increase in the future southern part of the site, and at least set aside the approval of this, because it's de facto approval, until the rezoning increases have been addressed in public.
Thank you very much. Perfect timing. Any questions for Mr. Smith? Seeing none, thank you for the presentation, and again, clearly lots of thought put into that, so much appreciated. Next on our list is Lauren Cutler, to be followed by Rod Leahy. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to address this committee. My name is Lauren Cutler. I'm the president of the Hampton Iona Community Group, which is the community in which this development lies. My presentation, one of my people on my board asked me how long it took me to put my letter together, and I said it was either a few hours or it was 10 years, because that's how long we've been dealing with this development. As a community association, first I'll address the historic restoration. We are not experts in this field. This adaptive restoration, we do not have a problem with per se. If this is the best way of adapting the convent, we understand that. Where we do have a problem, as other speakers have said, is with this significant increase in the massing. I'm glad to see that there's been a variety of the schematics shown here today, because the staff report only showed the link and made it look like it was 2 stories. So you've all had a chance to see how significant this massing is on the monastery. So there's been significant comment on that. The only other comment I would like to add with respect to this massing, for those who perhaps didn't read the 75-page report from Ashcroft, is from an architect that says the 9-story section of the proposed addition, which is attached to the remainder of the west wing, is very out of scale compared to the scale of the monastery. Attempts have been made by the design team to implement setbacks at the connection point to reduce the impact. The large scale of the additional moderately contradicts the minimal intervention standard for historic places. This was the architect for Ashcroft, the heritage architect, basically saying that he does not agree with what is being proposed and the impact it will have on the heritage designation. I'd also like to contrast this with the Oblate lands in Ottawa East. That is a 30-acre site which is having 1,500 units of residential units being put in. This is a 5-acre site with about 600. So you can do the math to see the level of density. But on the Oblate land, the Chatelaine building is being celebrated, not hidden from view. My other concerns are with respect to the uses, the proposed uses of the monastery. For years we have been told there would be some community use in the monastery. That has not happened. We're not aware that there's been any substantive discussions with the community on potential community uses. This was a commitment made by the developer to both the city and to the neighborhood through the minutes of settlement subsequent to an OMB challenge. But also, the applicant is saying that they're going to be putting in restaurants and residential units and B&Bs. When this first came forward for approval many years ago, a restricted use at that time was for hotel space. B&B maybe is only formalizing the fact that several of the units at Key West are already being used for Airbnb. Several cities are starting to treat Airbnb as hotels. I don't know if Ottawa is going to go in that direction, but it looks like we're going to have hotel units here, whether they're singularly owned or owned by a company that has several units. So I am concerned about that use. Secondly, the suggestion that there's going to be restaurants in the monastery. We've been hearing about these restaurants for 10 years now. There have been 3 restaurants in the development along Richmond Road. They have all closed. One of them was closed because they weren't paying the rent. A coffee shop that was in for a little over, I think, a year and a half, which from management I was told was even owned by Ashcroft, was closed due to lack of business. We are seeing a proposal where restaurants are going to go behind a 9-story wall on the north side and on the south side. They will not have any visibility from Richmond Road. How are people going to find these restaurants? So people coming from outside the neighborhood are not likely to be going to these restaurants. And even people within the neighborhood, I believe there is a general reluctance in the neighborhood.
Just a 30-second warning.
To visit businesses in this complex because of their dislike of the developer. And the history of that is 3 restaurants that have gone out of business. So I am concerned if the restoration is dependent upon the use of the building. I'm not against a restaurant per se, but I am skeptical it will happen. In my submission, I made a number of recommendations, including that the massing not go ahead, that there be a holding zone put on this to ensure that the historic restoration does occur before this second building, or the condo behind it, can be built. So I'll conclude my comments there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Questions for Mr. Cutler? I see Councillor Leeper.
Thanks, Chair. I think this might be a good moment to pause, because when I take a look at the elevations, all the materials that are available to the committee, and some members of the committee may know this property well, but could you situate where this building is in terms of visibility from anywhere else, particularly once the second stage of this redevelopment is put in near Byron? Where are you actually going to see this convent from?
You cannot see it from Richmond Road, except through the 2 arches, and really only one arch goes onto the convent. From the south, the building will be completely masked by what is called Building B, this proposed condo. And further, the building on the south side is supposed to have an archway through it. When the building was parallel to Byron, and the convent was on an angle, someone walking by could look through the archway and see the building through the archway. Not a lot of the building, but you could see it through the archway. If the building is now going to, Building B, the condo, is going to be on an angle, if you're looking through the archway, which is now on an angle to the convent, it's going to, I would imagine, change the views significantly. If you go to the schoolyard, you will be able to see the building. And if you live in a few houses on Leighton Terrace, you'll be able to see the building from your second floor. Other than that, the convent is going to be completely masked. Previously, it was behind a 15-foot wall. So if you were far enough back, you could easily see over the wall to the convent. Behind the 9-story buildings, there'll be no visibility from the north or south unless you are on the grounds and right next to it.
So the community's skepticism with respect to commercial uses in this location comes fundamentally down to the point that you can't actually see it from anywhere.
You can't see it, and restaurant uses that were very visible on Richmond Road all went broke. You have 3 examples of restaurants that did not survive.
There's some question about why. I'm not sure that it's because there's a lack of demand, but
well, you already have
the market
600 existing units, 300 on the north side of Richmond Road between the two Ashcroft buildings, and another 300 in the first condo on the sort of the visitation lands. And there are no coffee shops for a couple of blocks in either directions. So two broke already with essentially 600 units surrounding it.
Yeah. Now, I am interested, and perhaps I could try to understand a little bit better or a little more clearly. It doesn't sound like the HICG, the Community Association, is necessarily opposed to a partial demolition if that results in preserving the convent.
No, I don't think we are, and we're not experts in this area. We recognize that there is a cost to maintaining a historic building, and particularly if there are technical issues with respect to the HVAC system not performing unless you connect it, then that is not the major issue for us. It is the massing of this.
And we'll chat with the applicants or the proponent shortly about like how many more units that is, and how, because it is a significant increase in density. When the community settled with the developer its OMB appeal, one of the pieces was community use for the convent. And this comes up frequently. There are various different interpretations from legal. What do you consider to be a community use? Because I hear a lot. It's almost another community center. It's space that could be rented to NGOs. What is community use of the convent mean in the community association's mind?
Well, I'll answer that in the negative first. None of what we've seen here is community use. These are all private businesses. If I want to enjoy the chapel, I would not be able to walk into a brew pub and just sit there without ordering a beer or a meal. I'd say community use it can be a variety of uses. In the minutes of settlement, it was not restrictive. It did allow for not-for-profit organizations to go in. I actually thought, and I think colleagues to the east of me would disagree, that with a good restoration, this might have been an excellent site for a new library in the West End instead of Rosemount.
We've had that discussion.
But that would have been a community use.
Right.
Might have involved closing in the garden. Public meeting space in the chapel. We initially thought that might be possible. But we've had no discussion on community use.
One of the discussions that I have been having with Ashcroft has been around the provision of affordable housing units. Would that be considered an offset to the requirement that you have with the developer to provide community space?
That is not a discussion that the community has had. And frankly, with the level of density that has been allowed on the site, and all the units that are going in, including the additional units here, there should be some affordable housing as a trade-off for that, if there's going to be a trade-off somewhere.
But then you still want to see community space.
Yes.
Okay. And I'll just reiterate, this will be a month or so before it goes to Planning Committee for the zoning approval. So I hope we'll have some productive discussions in the next couple of weeks. Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Chip.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cutler, for coming out. So next on our list is Rod Leahy, to be followed by Robert Martin. Good morning and welcome.
I think we'll just go to the second. Okay. Correct. Good morning, Chair, committee members. Thank you for hearing this presentation. I've had oftentimes pleasure of working on this project for the last 8 years. It's been an interesting journey. And a lot discussed today. some factual, some, I think, some confusion about density. So, and public spaces and things that we've tried to achieve over the years. So, I had a presentation, but I think actually staff's presentation on the project was fairly complete. I think maybe what I'd like to do is just touch on some of the issues that came up today and talk about where we are and why we are today. This is a very difficult project to begin with, and we knew that going in. I believe my client must have known that too going in. This is a purpose-built building. It's quite a substantial size building. And the adaptive reuse of it has been very problematic right from the beginning. You know, what do we do with this building? The cost to restore it is a difficult use. We looked at any number of solutions over the years, and I've come to this solution, which is a combination of a restoration of the majority of the building, a demolition of part of one of the wings. The rethinking of the overall site plan and how the buildings sit on the site, and repurposing of the building. And I think we've come up with, a solution that is may not satisfy everybody, but I think it satisfies a lot in terms of the heritage, in the restoration, the adaptive reuse. So essentially what we're looking at is a residential building with the potential to have some commercial. In the event the commercial doesn't work, there's something to say that the area is designated right now as restaurant use because they essentially are part of residential building. The existing house in the future couldn't be adapted into a residential use if it wasn't successful. But I think what's important to look at is when we study the site and this issue that's up now, we actually looked at more of the ground plane and how the ground surface was working and what we tried to do to improve the public experience. And I know there's a lot of discussion about Ashcroft and, haven't given anything to the community, but I think, it's always nice to remind people of what has been given to the community. One has been actually opening up this site to the community through the portals on Richmond Road, and more importantly to the public space called, we call Nuns Walk, which is that almost an acre and a half, I think, area that's been deeded as a public process to get public pathway to get from Byron Avenue Parkway down through Richmond Road. And it's quite a positive public benefit there. I think in terms of density, the L-shaped building is actually, it's a reduction in density, and it's not based on the zoning. We actually have an approved site plan for a 9-story building and the buildings that you see to the south. And in the redistribution and the change of the programming, the space that's on this drawing is actually less than what's the approved site plan is in place. So it's actually a reduction in density. It's just a different shape to it. And there's been no increased density. We're not asking for an increased density. And at this point, we're quite comfortable with our figures that we're actually showing a decrease. What we've done is taken that L-shaped building, and it used to be, as pointed out by Mr. Jennings, it was running parallel with Byron Avenue as opposed to Richmond Road. And it actually the L turned the other way. And what it did was it blocked off, it created a very large wall running right from the monastery right through to Byron Avenue. We thought it was important to have a break there, and we actually reversed the L and turned it toward the monastery. And what we thought from a ground plane point of view, it actually created more unique spaces. And the development of this site plan is really right from the very beginning, is about creating a public experience that varies as you walk through the site. It's all about creating these very interesting private public spaces that...
It's giving you a 30-second warning.
Sorry, it's a hard project to do in 5 minutes. Anyway, so some of the big advantages of doing this project is, of course, the restoration and the rehabilitation of the majority of the convent, the adaptive reuse of it, as well as just the maintenance of the exterior walls. We've seen recently in the news what takes place where buildings aren't properly maintained. We think this is critical that we do this, and it's important that we move forward on this file so that it doesn't become landlocked if the balance of the site gets developed. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a number of questions, so Councillor Luther and then Member Small.
And thanks for that, Rod. So you'll have to take me through again the density equation, because when we take a look at the rendering that's on the screen, the bird's eye view there, there was a gap between the convent. The southwest wing of the convent was intact in the previous zoning approval, and now there is a building that goes from 9 to 6 to 4 stories that looks like extra units.
It does, but you actually have to take a look at the original site plan that was approved. So we did the site plan in 2 phases. We did from the Part A, which is from the convent to Richmond Road, and the second was from the convent to Byron Linear Park. And a site plan was submitted on both of those and approved in principle. And so we're measuring against that as opposed to measuring against one drawing and looking at it and say this is an increased area. You have to look at what was approved. And what was approved is it was a much larger building for the B building. It was much wider. And it turned the L shape, it actually got much closer to the building. It was only 6 meters away from the Heritage Building. And it turned, the L turned the opposite direction. So in terms of that B building, this is less square footage than what the original approval was. It's just you can't look at one graphic and say this area is bigger. You have to look at the entire, where we were and where we are today.
I appreciate that. Just for confirmation, because of course what we're looking at today is the L-shaped building where the zoning will come forward shortly, as well as the heritage permit for the convent. The 2 buildings that run north-south on the east and west to the south of the property, can you just confirm for me that Ashcroft intends to seek an additional 5th story of amenity space on the building that's on the east side behind Leighton Terrace, as well as push a 5th story closer to Byron Avenue in the building that runs along the west side of the property in the southern development portion?
Yes. Now, I'm not the architect for those 2 buildings, but because I've sat in through some of the development meetings on that, as well as public, and I believe there's about an 1,800 square foot 5th floor on top of the 4-story building, which would be an amenity room for building C and for building D. I understand that there is a small 2 stories, I think a 5th and 6th floor that project beyond the original limit of that space. And it was really, my understanding is, in terms of projection, is really to sort of soften and create better transition to Byron Avenue as opposed to necessarily adding floor space. That they thought, architecturally, I thought it was a better solution myself. So I'm not overly involved in that.
Just given the pretty intense development battle that took place on this site, I am surprised that they're proposing anything at the back of that lot that they don't already have permission to do. So
yeah, I could agree with the 5th and 6th, but the party room on the 4th floor, I think that's something we're doing in almost every project now, and in my opinion, it should be something that's brought into the zoning that to make active use of these large flat roof areas. And I think we can get a more interesting city and probably a more environmentally designed roofscapes as opposed to just gravel heat sinks. So
a big green roof there would be nice. So one of the other things that I have to be absolutely cautious about in every approval moving forward is the entry and egress to the site.
Yes.
Currently, the status quo is to have entry and egress under the existing zoning permission, the existing site plan, from Shannon Avenue. And maybe staff could just point out Shannon quickly there with the laser pointer. To the untrained observer, it probably looks like a bike path if you go cycling by.
Shannon Avenue is here, and this is actually showing the widened condition. It's actually essentially almost a 10-foot wide laneway.
It's honestly, those folks are living on something the size of a bike path.
I believe their front steps will almost be on the new pavement area.
Yeah, so it would be widened to very close to their property. I think it would take a bit of a piece of the park as well. So, that's the status quo, and we're all hoping to find options. One of the options that I've heard from the community is absolutely off the table, but continues to be brought up by many in the community, is a cut across the Byron Linear Park. And then, of course, we have the current site plan proposal, which is to bring traffic in and out of Leighton Terrace. So Leighton Terrace would presumably, its site plan, be configured to prevent traffic from egressing the site onto Leighton. Most people wouldn't want to do that anyways, because Island Park is a parking lot most of the day, certainly at peak. But I want to make sure that no matter what we do in this first phase of the new site plan, that we still have options for how to handle entry and egress.
Yes.
If this is approved with the site plan, with the new access and entry from Leighton, are we still going to have the option of using Shannon? Are we still going to have the option of using Byron after a good community discussion of those?
Yes, there's nothing we're doing in this phase that would preclude any option taking place in the next set. They're all sort of linked underground, and so we're comfortable making that statement. I think the servicing for the project is coming in. There is a laneway through here that gets to this sort of service area at the back of the building. Yeah.
Okay. And then there was a question that was posed by Mr. Cutler with respect to how do we know, what are the guarantees that Ashcroft is willing to give us that the convent will be restored as part of this approval? There's a lot of cynicism, obviously.
So I think it's something that we can work the planning department, come up with a solution. It could be something that could be tied into an occupancy permit, so that possibly you can't get occupancy of the 9-story building until the restoration work of the convent is completed. I think there are some legal mechanisms that could be done to ensure that takes place. I don't think you want to put in place something that says you got to do the convent first before you do the 9-story building, because I think I don't know enough about the financing, but I imagine the financing of the 9-story building and the convent will probably wrap together, and I think you probably don't want to isolate them, because I think the restoration of the convent is not a money-making project. I think it's basically, I think if it's wrapped into the overall project, I think it becomes to make sense from a financial institution's point of view. So I wouldn't want to tie up constraints from a construction point of view, but I think you could do it through an occupancy, something like that, to ensure it gets done. I would like to see this put to bed as much as anybody around here. So it'd be nice to see this dealt with in a way.
One last question, Chair, if I may. You've heard the cynicism about the use in the convent of being able to survive as a restaurant, and the community is right. The vacancies on Richmond Road from the very first stage of this have been troubling to the community. It's not good for us to have those inactive traditional Main Street. Much of the convent restoration is going to be given over to residential use, if I understand.
Yes.
How much of the convent would be preserved for potential commercial uses, and if those don't work, what are the options?
Right. So the area in blue, if we look at that, the ground floor plan, which is that's actually the lower level. So the first floor is the main. This is actually. This is a basement area here. You can see the underground parking here. It's semi-underground at this point. This is the existing basement area that we can get some potential use of. These areas are really a crawl space underneath the existing chapel as well as the house. So these are areas that can be used associated with the residential. And then on the ground floor, we've got all of this is residential space, which would be amenity areas taking advantage of the look and the doorways, the existing doorways onto this courtyard area. And then the commercial areas we're talking about are up on the, sorry, I'll go up here, sorry. On this area, this is the commercial area we're potentially talking about, but all of this, as we begin to develop the plans, could be made into residential. There's nothing that precludes it. We're not asking for commercial use only. We're saying this potentially has the ability to have a commercial use or a community use. We've talked about that. The only area that's probably difficult from a residential use would obviously be the chapel, because there is a restriction in there that, you know, they don't want to see a mezzanine put in place. The volume would list, but that could be easily converted into some use associated with the residential. So the success of this project isn't hinged on the commercial viability. There's a hope that it could become successful, but we can move it forward as residential use only. And then as on the upper floors, on the second floor, what's interesting about this proposal is take that second floor and the attic space and combine those into two-story units. We did talk about the idea of Airbnbs or that type of unit. Right now, Ashtoft's opinion really is just to turn these into nice, interesting residential units, and not bed and breakfast. It's not really their core strength. So what we are taking is that space that's never been used, that wonderful attic space, and adding it to the second floor space and really creating interesting units that would have beautiful views into the courtyard and around the overall community. So.
Chair, thank you very much. Thanks, Rod.
Okay, Member Smalley.
Thank you. I just had a sort of a technical question. Just wondered, is there currently sunlight in the courtyard? And if there is, what would the impact of the new construction be on that sunlight? And have you looked at that? I didn't see anything about it in the plans.
We have shadow studies. I'm not sure if they're in this package. There is light in the courtyard. I mean, because it's essentially a three-story buildings around it. And then if you compare it against the what's permitted under the zoning and what we're doing, there's not a huge significant difference between the two, but it definitely will have a huge impact in terms of the amount of light that goes in that courtyard. So with the 9-story building going in behind it, I mean, it is on the south side of that courtyard, so it's going to till the very late afternoon. There's some light. I don't think we did a shadow as part of this. This is sort of different than the planning presentation we'll be making, where we have those documentations. So, but
just to point out, the shadow study is in our package.
Oh,
it's in the package.
Sorry, I don't know. Do we have it in this? I'm not sure if I have it in this presentation.
It's sheet 23, I believe, in the back of the CHIS.
Nope. Oh, there it is. Yeah. I'm not sure why it's not in this presentation here. So I think you can see, or can you see? Do everybody have a copy of this? Yep. So you see the courtyard is generally, with the exception of a few times in June, there is in June there is sunlight in the courtyard in the high sun period in June, and then is reduced significantly through the September and March. Sorry.
Okay. Next question is Vice Chair Podolsky.
Yes, thank you very much. There's been some reference to the earlier form of the 9-story building that had site plan approval and zoning approval.
Yes.
Could Could we get that on the screen?
No. No, but he only shows a partial. Yeah.
So there's no image available of the approved site plan. Just for clarification, this was a 9-story building that did get site plan approval and was part of the original zoning package. Is that correct? I just want to make sure I have that correct.
Yeah. Yes.
And maybe just a question to my colleague Rod here. Since that was approved, what drove the change in the form of the building?
Two things. One was a major change in the use and how the project was being developed. At one point there, we're looking at my client was looking at a much larger seniors residence. That was a very large sort of L-shaped building that wrapped around in a different configuration. And the other was I was somewhat uncomfortable with the ground plane and where visibility and the sort of connection were working, and I thought there was an opportunity to move the building from toward an orthogonal grid consistent with the convent. So that relationship was formed between the existing building and the proposed building, and away from its sort of grid to the buildings to the south. So there was one sort of a use issue as well as in my own sort of a pedestrian experience. I was hoping to create a sort of better sort of ground plane. My whole experience with this site has always been how does one experience these spaces from a pedestrian walking through the site. This is a pedestrian site, but cars really are restricted to a very small part of it. And so I thought where we opened up was working better than what we had originally proposed.
So forgive me for just following up on the question. It had to do with the first part of your answer. I want to make sure I understood that the 9-story building that had been approved, it had an intended use as residential use.
It's always been everything south of the convent has always been residential, but it's been it was a much larger seniors residence, retirement home, and sort of senior sort of condominium. It was a much sort of larger scale, and I think over the years, the nature of development really has changed, and so there was opportunity to look at this building more as a freestanding building, the B building as a rental building, and he thought he could meet his seniors requirement into the smaller building, which is now in the southwest corner of the site. And then that 4-story building along Nuns Walk is the now moved out of the seniors as well, and that's into a smaller, lower scale condominium project.
Right. So
there's been an overall change in how this whole part of the site works.
Right. So that the envelope and the footprint of the approved B building design had to change because of a change in the program.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, question. I have a question, but I'll go last. So, question from Councillor Wilkinson.
Very thorough. I've just come back from England where I looked at some ways in which some of these buildings, I was at one which is a heritage way of connecting a new building to an old building. And it's something that's always interested me, and where I've seen it done well, and I've seen it done terribly. What I was wondering here was, I just don't understand why we're losing one part of one of the wings of the original monastery down on one side and not keeping that as part of the feature, which could have been incorporated in a new building just as much as it could have been taken out completely. And it sort of takes away, from my view, of that actually encouraging understanding of what was there before, by actually taking a piece of it away so that the whole entity is not looked at together. Can you explain why you've done that?
One of the things we've done is, what we thought was really important, was to maintain that experience within the courtyard of the four-sided courtyard. So even though we're removing part of that wall that defines it, we're actually replacing the wall back to that same height with the adaptive reuse of those stones. So it actually goes back in line to where the wall was. And then that's why this is a little misleading here, in that this section here is actually quite low in this area, and so the building, that the two-story field inside the courtyard is maintained. I think we have some perspectives. If we go up, yeah. Oh, this way, is that right? I'm just trying to look at some views within the courtyard, more pedestrian views. Where you can see, so inside this courtyard, this is what you're seeing is the building in behind here. This wall here is the wall that's being removed and then rebuilt to that same height as the wall over here. So this courtyard and this wall is basically keeping to define the courtyard space. And then we've again rebuilt the link wall, which wasn't considered important in the original designation. It was something that was always seen to be removed. And we've rebuilt that wall and again changed the paving patterns as a memory of that one-story link between. So we think we've been successful in the keeping the important attributes of the courtyard. So the four walls of the courtyard remain intact, and then by setting the 9-story building back, it creates more of a backdrop to the courtyard.
So you're rebuilding the wall to look like it was before you take it down?
That's right.
The same style of windows and type of things, so that it actually integrates in as if it was still the original building, or is...
No, the new windows will be, this is clearly, this is new, and it's really been designed to create the same sort of sense of scale. But to the observer, it will be that, this is a new wall. We don't want it to look like a fake wall or a restored wall. It's basically using the materials, and the wall is now aligned with the building. I think what's important to note is that one of the problems with the convent, and we've been saying this, is the adaptive reuse to it. It's a very limiting space of these existing floors. So by doing this, we've eliminated sort of 1/3 of the problem area by putting a usable footprint in this place. And but in our opinion, we've created the environment that still works in terms of the courtyard and the sort of the feeling of the sense of sort of tranquility that's within this space.
So basically, you didn't want to keep the original there because it was not going to be as useful space and you could use it for something that was more intensive. Is that kind of the idea?
It becomes, yes, definitely more usable than what's there. We're doing our best with the balance of the site. I think we found sort of active uses for the rest of the site. We're also, what hasn't been noted here is the cost involved. This is, I'm sure you hear about when you talk about the Wellington Street project, but the costs involved with the restoration of stone buildings such as this. I mean, this needs to do...
My church is a stone building.
Pardon me?
My church is a stone building built in 1839.
Right.
We've maintained it.
Yes, and so this building needs, and again, we hired John Cook, who you'll be hearing from today, to do an analysis of the existing building, what's involved to make sure what happened on Wellington doesn't happen here. So we have to do an extensive sort of rehabilitation of all the stonework of this building. And, again, this helps in that because it does limit some of that where the balance of it can take place. And we think we've done it in a way that, again, from the public's perception, This is really seen from, either walking through those portals in Richmond Road or walking through Nuns Walk. All of those views and those spaces are accessible and will be maintained and sort of restored back. So we think from the majority of what the public sees, this building will be, as I said, restored and brought back to their sort of former glory. So we think it's, in all these things there's always trade-offs, as we must live constantly in this panel. There's always sort of trade-offs between the perfect solution. We think what we've done here is found a balance between the restoration of the entire building against what we're doing. Again, we talked about the advantage of this proposal is being able to make use of the mechanical systems that are in place for the major building and bringing that in without looking at having to put sort of mechanical rooms on this building. We can feed everything from the proposed building. So we think there's some real benefits to this. We can wrap up the whole restoration of this part with the financial economics of the building and behind. So
we're a little concerned also when you talked about they're changing the use, and that's going to make you have to change the building. Uses are going to change all the time.
Yeah.
And I think you have to come to some sort of conclusion that this is a way that we can make a use in there which can be adapted if we need to, because we see that happening in the city all the time.
Right.
So I really get a little concerned when people start making changes in short periods of time based on use changes, because those uses changes could happen again and again as you're going through the process. What's your timing for getting this done is fairly quick, I understand.
Yes, it's immediate because, what we're hoping to do is start work on this project right away to be able to ensure that it gets completed in advance of the buildings on the linear park, because once they're in place, this will become a landlocked
Others have commented on that already, and that problem of the traffic is...
So the issue with use, what we're saying is we're not making this. It seems like some of the people are saying this is financially dependent on a restaurant going in. What we're saying is that we would really like a restaurant to go in, but it's not financially dependent on the restaurant. There are projects.
Okay, any other questions?
No, that's my point.
Okay, good. Okay, you can both speak, so Member Quinn.
Yes, my question is about the stabilizing of the historic building. Ashcroft Development has owned it since 2010. 2 condominiums have gone in. This building is clearly in worse shape now than it was 10 years ago.
Yes.
There's evidence of damage that has resulted from the construction of the new condominiums to the north.
Yes.
I just walked around the site again last night to remind myself. And so I'm just thinking about, and clearly the conservation architect hired for this project, I think, has put a fair amount of emphasis on the need to start focusing on how you're going to protect this building, especially with a 2-story underground parking lot going in right there.
Yes.
Can you address that?
Yeah, the majority of damage was done, unfortunately, it was done at the very beginning with the sheet piling that was put on essentially to protect the building. I mean, the vibration, I don't think, there should have been some better care taken, and some substantial damage was done. There's no denying it. It's unfortunate. Since then, underpinning has taken place to at least stop any further deterioration, but it needs extensive work done to make sure nothing else happens, and the decision on the underground parking is all going to be based on coming up with a viable solution. So we would only do that 2 levels of underground parking if we were assured that no further damage would take place. Luckily, we don't have any, there's no rock to be removed on this site, so we don't have any blasting will take place anywhere on the site. We're into rock is down, I think, about 35 feet or so all the parking can take place with simple excavation. No shoring is required for the balance of the site because we can cut basically back. The parking garage has been designed to make sure we didn't have to do any shoring. So the only area of concern is that area immediate to the existing convent building. And if it was deemed to be unacceptable by the engineers involved, then we would not put the underground parking there. We would move it further south to underneath the other projects. You know, the 9-story building could go, instead of 2 floors, it could go 3 floors, for example. But I say we did have retained Mr. Cook and his team to sort of go through the project. They've outlined a work program, and you know, it's imperative that we get to that as quickly as possible. So,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor McKenny? Okay. I have a final question, if there are none others, which is, Mr. Leahy, you heard from a number of the public delegations, and you read in the CHIS some concern about the relationship between the 9-story building in terms of scale and its relationship to the existing convent. Within the provisions of the minor changes to the design, that if we were to pass the recommendation we delegate to staff, what options do you see in the proposal before us to further address the concern, which seems to be fairly widespread, again, based on the CHIS comments, based on what you heard from Heritage Ottawa, from David Jeans, from the community? Do you see there, and if so, I'd love to hear, you know, your thoughts on it, ways of mitigating that sense of scale difference between the 9-story addition and the existing convent?
I think the issue of scale existed substantially prior to this. I mean, the scale of the 9-story buildings both to the north and the south, it basically created the environment. I think what we're trying to do is mitigate that through, instead of, you know, it's fine to look, I'm looking at that picture on the screen, and this overwhelming nature of that bird's eye view of the tower sort of looking down. I think you know, when I experience buildings, I experience it more like this scheme, and I experience it more as a pedestrian walking through and seeing what these spaces could be, and how much life they can bring to this space. So I think there's opportunity through landscaping. There could be additional setbacks that could be talked about through the zoning process, as well as, you know, there's an interesting thing about, do we bring zoning first or bring heritage first? I thought it was appropriate to bring this through this committee first, to work through planning, because I didn't want to do the reverse and get planning approval and come here and get a reversal on that. So I thought this was a first step. So I think moving forward, you know, I think some of the details, I think again, the way the building butts immediately to the building could be looked at, maybe a greater separation could be increased there, but I don't think you're ever going to get away from the fact that there's a 9-story building immediately behind the space. I think when you actually go into the space between the existing convent and the building that's been built, it's actually quite a very interesting walk through there to see how those spaces have developed. It's actually quite a pleasing environment, even though you have a very tall building immediately adjacent to a heritage building. So I think it can be resolved through good design. So.
Okay, thank you for that answer. We may take you up on that.
Okay.
So with that, thank you for coming out this afternoon now, no longer morning. And the final speaker on our list of public delegations is Robert Martin. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome.
Good morning, Chair and members of committee. I think there's been a reasonable explanation of the project by city staff, and I too would also like to compliment the public delegations, especially Mr. Jeans, on his extremely thorough research and I guess history of the site. I guess I would say to the members of the committee, it's absolutely an extremely challenging project and site. part of the success of the journey to date has been the engagement with the design team and the city staff on trying to find alternate forms of development that are more respectful of the heritage character. And in that regard, I would say, much more happy with the place we've come to than where we started. And much of our work, although there have been many conversations today which I would argue don't really pertain to heritage character or heritage considerations at all, they're more sort of site plan or sort of past history issues with community interests. Our work is definitely governed by the identified heritage attributes on the part of the city, and so that really has been the starting point for our engagement with the project. And as Rod has indicated, notwithstanding the sort of bird's eye views, much of our lens for this project has been based on the, if you like, the public experience, what one sees at grade, and the opportunity here for this site, which was cloistered and in some sense still will be by the massing of the development, but to try and find a way to invite public and passers-by to navigate through archways both from the north and to the south. And so some of the input that we gave to the design team was about framing these views and creating this, if you like, weaving movement through the site. And one feature which hasn't been talked about too much, it's the view from the Byron Avenue, almost this sort of corridor between the two buildings. There was a deliberate intention to create an opening in the residential wing to the south to again create that sense of invitation and destination into the courtyard. So I don't have a lot more to add, but I would certainly welcome questions on the part of committee members. Thank you.
I see a couple. So, Vice Chair first.
Yes, this is a question that has to do with the cultural heritage impact statement, and I've read very carefully the negative and positive impacts of the proposed development and the mitigating considerations. If you had, but I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you had the choice of the original proposed development, the 9-story building to the south, which was independent, and the conservation of the whole of the cloistered footprint, and this one, from a heritage planner's perspective, which one respects the heritage attributes of the designated property more?
To my colleague, a very astute question and difficult one to answer easily. I think both have pros and cons. Some of the challenges, for instance, some of the challenges we faced with the earlier development scheme was about the inevitable placement of mechanical equipment and rooftop units. So the scheme where there was an office infill, to place a lot of these units on the roofscape, which we didn't feel worked too well. Generally, I think I'm more partial to the scheme that's presented before you today, because it does create more of this almost framing dialogue between the sort of two L's of the convent and the residential wing, and these kind of interlocking planes. And certainly the openness or opening up of the courtyard, I think, has greater potential in terms of destination with the current scheme.
Councillor McKenna? Member Quinn? No, I thought I saw you guys' motion. Okay. Councillor Leeper?
So that invitation from Byron that you spoke about, when one gets to the new building, the 9-story building, talk to me about that experience of being invited then through to the courtyard. Because I think many in the community are cynical that will be any kind of publicly accessible space.
Okay, so maybe I could start with it's Rod's sheet 3, which sort of shows the ground plane. I don't know if we have that. So I'm speaking to the image in the bottom right of your screen. So to the right, we see the two, I guess I can point this here. So this is the axis of that link that goes towards the Biolinear Parkway. And it's this gap and the break in the residential units that again allows a flow through this linear link into the actual courtyard, and there's still the memory of the original enclosure, and similarly that flow outward towards the sort of so-called Nuns Walk park. So I see this as something that could work quite well. Certainly the shadowing studies I think indicate that courtyard would have shadow for a significant portion of the year, but perhaps in this scheme less than they would have had with the option, the original one that Member Podolsky had talked about, and in terms of its orientation.
But you don't have an architectural treatment to show us at this point?
Well, I think there's some renderings, such as the ones on the other screen here that show these. This is the view up the linear. I'm sorry, Member Wilkinson, but to the bottom, one sees the movement between the two north-south mask buildings, and this distant destination of the courtyard.
I'm not sure that's particularly inviting.
No, and I think there's not an easy solution here, and a lot of what we tried to juggle with, and some of our advocacy in the file to date has been about what is the vocation of this convent. I think expressed certain skepticism about the office use and its viability, and in the end, the adaptive reuse. The previous scheme was much more facadism, essentially entire demolition of floors and wings behind, and the current scheme, which actually in a meaningful way adaptively reuses the majority of the structure, and its residential use is consistent with the existing one, I think is, and not only for the building itself, but for the adjacent residential uses as well. So I would anticipate that residents of both the convent and their surrounding communities will find their little place in the sun or the shade as they see fit.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
I just have maybe just one last question. Mr. Martin, further to the question I asked Mr. Leahy about what further could be done to get this application maybe to a slightly better place. In the CHIS, you actually put forward some very concrete ideas. And the two that I'd like to read out, because I think they respond to many of the comments that have been made. One is careful detailing of the step-back section of the addition connecting directly to the west wing to ensure a suitable transition and mitigation of height impacts to the existing monastery. And the second is widening of the proposed glass connection at the junction of the addition and the monastery in the west wing to facilitate better reading at the transition between new and old. I've drawn those two out of a longer list. I guess my question to you is, would you agree that those would be two priorities in terms of the conclusions of the CHIS, or would you like to draw to the committee's attention other priority modifications that you think could help enable this application to read better in terms of the adaptive reuse?
The idea of this linkage or gasket between the old and new is extremely important. The earlier version of the scheme had a width something like 1.2 meters or 4 feet, which we felt was too narrow and it wouldn't really serve its intended purpose. So the current iteration of the design is double that. It's more like 2.4 meters. We've also talked with the design team about again reinstating the masonry so that in sort of navigating between this this circulation element, one actually gets that dialogue or tension between the sort of texture of the original building and the contemporary work. But certainly the element in the box up on the screen, my hope, I guess, is that it would be refined in greater detail and perhaps a lighter touch and even a slight lowering of the linkage just below the roof eave edge would be beneficial. So those are the kind of finer scale details that I think could improve the scheme, and our hope is that we or another heritage consultant would be involved in the project as it goes forward. But I think the part that's I want to emphasize most strongly, for us, I see significant vindication or almost victory in the sense that where we started, we now have an owner who's willing to invest quite a bit of money in some meaningful restoration of all the masonry, windows, tin work, woodwork around the building. And so in terms of the public realm experience for the identified heritage attributes, we're getting I think a significant commitment and plan to conserve.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer, and thank you for coming out this afternoon. That exhausts our speakers list, so now there's an opportunity for questions and comments to staff, if any, or general observations. Councillor Luker?
Thanks. Just a quick question to staff. The restoration that would be required on this building, I assume, is pretty significant. How would we know that it has been done properly? What kind of investigation can we do of it? What kind of standards can we hold them to? What kind of guarantees can we give to the community that the building will continue to stand after this restoration work for a significant period of time?
Thank you. I think the community can take some solace in the fact that the applicant has hired the heritage consultant to do the heritage impact statement, which also outlines a conservation plan, which is quite extensive for this project. Through the rezoning of this property, we are working quite closely with our colleagues in development review to ensure provisions to ensure that the restoration is undertaken as part of that application as well.
So there would be a document that would describe where in site plan exactly what work is going to be undertaken and set out the tests that they will need to meet before that site plan is approved, or sorry, I guess to which they will be subject as a result of site plan agreement.
I'd just like to reiterate the sort of recommendations, the standards that I think you're alluding to. Those have been outlined in the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement and the Conservation Plan, and that would be reinforced through the heritage permit itself. And then sort of the detailed design would be taken care of through the site plan application.
And there's third-party verification of that?
We would be involved with the site plan application as well.
The site plan application, but verifying that they have undertaken all the work that is in the site plan.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yes, my question. Decide which one I'm going to ask. I have quite a few, but I think I'll start with just. I'd like to hear from you how you see this design as the design of the addition as being in its current form, as opposed to how the site is currently zoned, meeting the standards and guidelines in terms of compatibility and having the massing and the materials compatible with the existing historic property. considering that it's now so much closer. In fact, it's part of the building.
Thank you for that question. We have reviewed the addition against these standards and guidelines. The addition generally respects the standards for conserving the heritage value of the place.
In what way?
The applicant has outlined earlier that this is a new appropriate use for the historic site. They're doing a number of, quite a large amount of restoration work, repair before replace, especially in the historic house. And also the location for the new addition is set back from the monastery, from the chapel and the historic house on the site. And also sensitively and appropriately designing the addition in terms of materials to be compatible with the monastery in terms of the stone, the smooth stone versus the rough cut stone of the chapel and the historic house.
Okay, and I think you answered it at the end there. I think you got there. Thank you. My other question pertains to the existing zoning stipulating a no building area, and I'd just like to know how staff worked around no longer, I guess, basically ignoring that no building. I don't want to use the word zone because that implies things, but area, I guess, is better. The design disregards that. I'm just wondering that justification.
Yeah, correct. That's true. They've applied for a zoning change. So we're working with our development review colleagues. They're in attendance here if you have some specific questions, but the intent is to go through a zoning change to remove that prohibition. So that's part of the process that we've been working with.
At the time that was negotiated back around when this was before the OMB, working closely with communities, etc., I guess my concern is that a due process was undertaken at the time. And I understand, obviously, the applicant is applying to have that officially changed and rezoned. But I think there was the reason behind the existence of the no building area was very clear in that it was to protect the integrity of the historic monastery. And I have a concern about the fact that has been disregarded in this new proposal. And the implication, obviously, as we've heard, the concerns about the significant portion of the west wall being lost. So, anyhow, thank you for.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Hooper would like to wrap up. Maybe I'll say a couple of things now. I want to pick up on a couple of points that were made. First is the concern that I don't remember if it was Member Small or Councilor Hooper raised about ensuring that the adaptive reuse of the work in the convent is done prior to, say, any occupancy of the 9-story building. And what I understand from speaking to Mr. Curry is that there would be an opportunity through a holding provision in the zoning to ensure that that happens. So I want to give the committee reassurance that staff have contemplated that, and the idea is that the holding provision would not be lifted until heritage staff were satisfied that the restoration work on the existing convent was done as per the issuance of the heritage permit. So that's the first point. And the second point is I'd like to pick up both on Mr. Martin's CHIS recommendations and Mr. Leahy's what I took to be a willingness on his part and on his client's part to further refine those two elements that I spoke to, both that notion of detailing the step backs and trying to respond a little bit to that looming issue, and also looking at a possible expansion of the break on that south side of the convent. And so with the committee's agreement, I would propose that we direct that staff continue to work with the applicant between now and when this item goes to planning committee on those two items in particular, but certainly wouldn't want to limit staff and the applicant to those 2 points, because in the CHIS there's actually a longer list of what I thought were some very thoughtful mitigation ideas. So I just wanted to propose that be direction to staff, and I see nodding of heads, so I just thought I would put that forward. And the last item that I wanted to raise, and it's not a heritage item, but it came up, and it's something that I think we'll need to pursue at Planning Committee, is, and so maybe I'll have a chance to speak to Councillor Luper and Mr. Cutler about this point. But on the restaurant point, I think what's important is I appreciate that the community is saying, well, hold on, are there market conditions for viability of a commercial space? But I personally don't see the alternative, i.e. further residential space, as a useful resolution of that problem, because if the idea is that you want to have some quasi-public space, a restaurant or a cafe is a form of quasi-public space. It's a third space, as Klaus Oldenburg called it. To me, that's preferable in terms of, at least allowing customers of a restaurant and cafe to have access to this new renovated space, than privatizing the space completely through making that all the residential. So it's a conundrum. I get the point that maybe it isn't realistic, and it's not a heritage item. But I did want to address that point, because I do think, given all of the work that is before us in terms of a possible restoration of this space, you do want to make sure that there are opportunities for members of the public in some way, shape, or form to access part of that space. So I think that's a conversation that maybe needs to happen on the margins and maybe is better brought up in the context of the planning elements of this application. Anyway, those are the three comments that I wanted to make. I know that Councillor Luper wanted to wrap up, so I'll give him the floor.
Thanks, Chair. And I will keep it really brief. This has obviously been a long and contentious development application or development in the neighborhood for many, many years now. The community anger is still there. This development probably never should have been approved in its current form. We've blocked the convent off from Richmond Road, and there's no going back on that. The 9-story building in behind is going to shield the convent one way or the other. And so it's difficult for the community to accept. Our heritage advocates, for whom I have a tremendous respect, have said, don't demolish any of it, and I have considerable sympathy for them. When Ashcroft purchased this property and promised to preserve the convent, and even to put some of it to use as community space, there is still a significant desire in the community to hold them to their word. On the other hand, I think many people in the community would like to see something move forward and some certainty given as we watch that building continue to become more and more dilapidated. I think today what I would ask on behalf of the community is, if this subcommittee is willing to vote against this proposal, to provide a refusal recommendation to Planning Committee, I would like to work with the applicants and with the community to try to develop something that is less overpowering of the heritage building, that doesn't go as abruptly from the remaining wing to 9 stories. Recognizing that some sort of an adaptive reuse is probably better done sooner rather than later for this particular development. So I think a refusal recommendation from this committee would help us to get something a little bit better. I do want to recognize that after several iterations of proposals, including a 25-story tower on this site, we finally do have a legitimate development proposal in front of us. It's not yet perfect. I would love to get a little bit of leverage to help us get it to that point where it is much more acceptable. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. I know the Vice Chair wanted to speak, and then I'm going to make a final comment after the Vice Chair.
Yes, thank you very much. I first visited this property, was permitted in 2009 before it was put up for sale. I was invited in by the real estate agent that was appointed by the sisters, and his question to me, well, it was not really a question, it was a statement which the voice raised at the end. This isn't heritage, is it? And I've inspected the building twice and recommended immediately that he invite the city's heritage planners to come and visit the Sisters of Visitation building. And that led, of course, to the designation and to the planning process that has been going on now for 8 years. I've listened to the architect, I've listened to Heritage Ottawa and other delegations, and I've also listened to Robert Martin, the heritage consultant who prepared the Cultural Heritage Impact Statement. And I must say that on the whole, I think that the staff report, which recommends approval of the decision, does not do justice to the heritage value of this former convent. Former convent was respected in the original zoning by allowing it to be a three-dimensional cloister which one could appreciate in the round, and I think would have been a unique and is a unique landmark in the city, even though it's not easily viewed from the public realm anymore. But nevertheless, I think it's a signal that the proposed changes erode the value of that attribute. And I say that with all due respect to the heritage planners and land use planners as well. Having said that, I also just heard a plea by Councillor Looper to refuse the application in order to extract more concessions and more respect for the heritage designated property. And so I just wanted to say that I will support his plea and have no hesitation in voting to reject this application. I think that the arguments that have been made in favor of the application by staff and the consultants, I don't buy. I do buy what the statements that have made by Heritage Ottawa and others, basically requesting that the application be refused. And I hope that others on this committee will heed Councillor Looper's call and take the stance and refuse the application in the hope that that will create a better outcome for the community and for the city's heritage program as a whole. Thank you.
Okay. I wasn't going to speak again, but other comments have prompted me to provide my own wrap-up comments. Firstly, on the points of agreement with Councillor Looper and Vice Chair Podolsky, there's no question that we're dealing with a compromised site. I hope that planners in future generations look at what happened on Richmond Road and use it as a lessons learned for how not to do urban infill. So there were clearly mistakes made with that application. and I do hope that it is treated as a learning opportunity in terms of how not to treat a site like that. Be that as it may, we're dealing with a site that already has buildings on Richmond Road that block views and make public access to the site very, very difficult. And as we've heard from staff, this has been a long march with the applicant, not always easy. But I think at the end of the day, the reason why I'm prepared to contemplate a less than ideal application is that in an adaptive reuse situation, almost by definition, adaptive reuse demands some amount of compromise. And so the question for those around this table is what's being put before us as an adaptive reuse something that we are willing to work with? And I think even among those who are recommending we vote no, there's a willingness that yes, this is something to work with. I'm uncomfortable with the idea that a no vote from this committee should be used as a negotiating tool. I think it undermines our credibility if we recommend something to planning, but secretly we're saying, if it's fixed, you can overturn it. I much prefer the approach of providing direction to staff. We've been very clear about the specific changes that we would like staff to work with the applicant between now and planning. Those of us who are members of council always have the opportunity to vote against this if they feel that the changes that have been asked for through staff direction are not met. I appreciate that the public members don't have that opportunity, but I'm loath from a procedural point of view to say, we're going to say no, but we want you to fix it and overturn our vote. I think we should give staff and the applicant the benefit of the doubt, and again, certainly my colleagues on council can still judge the outcome of that in a future vote. It's not perfect. It's adaptive reuse. We'd like to see some further work on it. We've made that clear through the staff direction. And there will be another opportunity through the zoning application to deal with some very germane issues relating to use, relating to access, relating to setbacks on the site. So I just wanted to relay the fact that I will be voting in favor of the staff recommendation with the caveat that we've been very clear on the staff direction. Our clerk is writing that up, and there'll be an opportunity over the next few weeks for staff and the applicant to continue work on that basis. So with that, and I'm sorry we may not have consensus on this one, but that's okay. That's a healthy democratic discussion, which is important. We'll have yeas and nays on this vote.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes.
Member Quinn?
No.
Member Smallwood?
No.
Councillor McKenney?
No.
Councillor Moffat? Vice Chair Podolsky?
No.
Chair Newsbaum?
Yes.
2 yeas, 4 nays.
Okay, so the staff recommendation fails, and this will go to planning committee with a, do we need to do a substitute motion? We need a refusal recommendation, which I'm sure the vice chair would be very happy to put forward. So we'll just do opposite votes on the refusal motion, so 4 yeas, 2 nays, and if everyone can trust that the refusal motion will be done as per what the vice chair would want to see, there's no point in pausing on that. It's just standard language, I think, on the refusal recommendation. So be comfortable with that. So there will be a refusal motion to replace, which was passed on the basis of 4-2.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great.
Do you want that formally done, or is it not necessary?
No. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so thank you to staff and thank you to all the speakers who came out to speak on this item. So we'll move on to the next items, which we added to the agenda at the beginning of this meeting. So first up is, we'll deal maybe with the Bank Street item first. And I'll just ask staff to provide members just with a quick summary of why staff are recommending that we reissue the heritage permit. Who's speaking to that?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'll just go through 6 key points very quickly so you have an overview of why we're here. So a heritage permit was issued by Council in February 2013 after review from the equivalent of the Built Heritage Subcommittee. Site plan control there was site plan control approval in August of 2015. So this permitted the demolition and new construction on the subject property. So that site plan control was set to expire in September 2017. The applicant filed an extension to the site plan agreement, which was approved, and now it is valid until 2019. But the heritage permit had expired on February 27, 2015. So the development cannot proceed until a new heritage permit is issued. So considering that today's proposal is consistent with the plans that were approved by Council in 2013, staff view this matter as technical in nature, and we thus propose this motion to reinstate the previous recommendations.
Okay, are there any questions on this item? Is that straightforward for everybody? If so, I guess the Vice Chair, can you read out the substantive motion, please?
Yes, be it resolved that the Built Heritage Subcommittee recommend that Planning Committee recommend that Council approve the application to demolish 488 500 Bank Street and approve the application to construct a new building at the same address and delegate authority for minor changes to the General Manager of Planning and issue the heritage permit with a 2-year expiry date from the date of issuance. This is paraphrasing the detailed thing, which I believe is on the screen somewhere over there. Thank you.
Great. So is that item carried? Carried. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. So our last item, as we agreed at the beginning of the meeting, is we're going to hear from staff a verbal update on the events surrounding the McGee House. So I'm going to ask various staff members to come up to the front, and there will be a presentation and an opportunity for questions.
Good morning, Chair and members of the Built Heritage Subcommittee. I'm here today to provide a briefing to members on the unfortunate collapse of a portion of McGee House on July 24th. McGee House, as committee members likely know, is a Part 4 Ontario Heritage Act property designated by the former City of Ottawa in 1996. This is an information briefing with no decision required today by members of committee. I'd also like to acknowledge the property owner, Ovidio Sabrisa, is in the audience along with his wife, and we acknowledge that this is a very trying time for him at the moment, and he has our sympathies. Today's presentation will be led by Jake Gravel, who's furthest on my right, Program Manager Enforcement from Bylaw Services, and he'll speak to the inspection actions undertaken on the property by Property Standards Officers. John Buck, Deputy Chief Building Code Official, Building Inspection and Enforcement, on the role that Building Code Services has played in this matter. On my left is John Cook, and Chris Vapney is in the audience as well, of John Cook and Associates, heritage engineers who were engaged by the city by Building Code Services, who relay the findings of their engineering assessment, and I will conclude and wrap up with next steps, and then of course we're open to your questions. Also supporting us on this file is Christina Mahone of Legal Services, who may also answer your questions on the side. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jake to speak to the inspections on the property.
Thank you, Court. Mr. Chair, I can confirm that 1119 Wellington is on the city's list of vacant heritage buildings. The building has undergone routine inspection since 2017. This initiative sees this list of buildings currently standing at 24
inspected visually by a property standards officer every 3 months. The inspection is visual in nature of the exterior, as we do not have legal right to enter the building. Working alongside heritage staff, the property standards officer inspects for integrity of the heritage attributes of the property, as well as many others under the property standards bylaw that he sees while on site. He can order engineering reports as required within reason. Orders may be issued by the officer with directive to comply. These orders have specific direction on how the attributes are to be repaired or replaced due to their heritage nature, and there are directives on the quality of workmanship. Re-inspections follow once the property owner notifies that the work is complete. The city has authority to undertake the work itself for non-compliance and will bill back to the owner under the Ontario Building Code Act and/or issue charges for failing to comply under the Provincial Offences Act. In the case of McGee House, its heritage attributes are the rubble stone construction, cornice and mansard roof with dormer windows. In this case, we can advise that in March 2017, an order was issued to this property regarding the need to repair mortar joints, repair to concrete, repair to door frames, dormer windows, exterior wood components, and remedy a hole in the roof. In July 2017, the property owner responded in writing to the investigating officer and advised that the work had either been completed or would be completed. The investigating officer re-inspected the property in September 2017 to determine if the property was now in compliance. In November 2017, the investigating officer had prepared a summons for the owner for failing to comply and was trying to serve the property owner for the offense, but was unsuccessful in doing so. In March 2018, Bylaw received a complaint from a member of the public about the condition of the building. On March 14th, 2018, attending officers saw minor cracking in mortar and wood fascia in a state of disrepair. However, determined an engineering report was not required at that time. June 2018, last inspection was undertaken, and again, minor mortar issues were observed, as well as the integrity of the wood framing. Remedying these issues identified from a heritage perspective were ongoing with the owner.
Thank you. Now, from a Building Code Services perspective, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Following the collapse event, which occurred the evening of Tuesday, July the 24th, the site was turned over by Ottawa Fire Services to Building Code Services, and that turnover took place the morning of Wednesday, July the 25th. On July the 25th, orders were issued under the authority of the Building Code Act prohibiting occupancy of 1119 Wellington, as well as the adjacent building immediately to the west at 1121 Wellington, and directing the property owner to take measures to deal with the unsafe condition at 1119 Wellington. It should be noted that at this time, no occupants of 1121 Wellington remain displaced, as remedial measures have since been undertaken in order to allow those residents to reoccupy 1121. Stantec Engineering, who were on site the evening of the collapse event, advised that the building was in a state of distress, with the potential for further progressive collapse. Building Code Services subsequently engaged engineering firm John Cook & Associates to undertake a review of 1119 Wellington, and Mr. Cook will speak to his findings shortly. Copies of Mr. Cook's reports will also be provided to committee members, and when I say Mr. Cook's reports, these reports were co-authored by Chris Bachny, who is, as Court had mentioned, in the gallery. Mr. Cook determined that the westerly wall was in danger of collapse and posed an immediate threat to public safety. Measures were required to remove part of the roof, the remaining westerly wall, and the southwest corner of the building. This work was ordered by the chief building official under the authority of emergency order, which overrides any requirement for heritage approval. This work was successfully undertaken at the city's expense on the evening of Friday, July the 27th. John Cook & Associates staff was on site overseeing the work, along with Building Code Services and heritage staff. Costs borne by the city will be sought to be recouped from the property owner.
The property owner has received a copy of Mr. Cook's reports and also received the following directives through orders issued under the Building Code Act. So by August the 7th, to provide an engineer's design on the interim bracing and shoring for the entire building, and implement all required interim stabilization measures, and provide an engineer's report of the interim stabilization measures. By August the 14th, under the direction of a structural engineer, provide a report assessing the remainder of the structure and providing permanent remediation measures. And by August the 20th, have any demolition or long-term stabilization work undertaken. Now, these timelines may be revised based on the owner's ability to comply. However, the city maintains leverage through the Building Code Act to ensure that any required work is undertaken in a timely manner. And I can turn it over now to Mr. Cook for his comments.
Mr. Chairman and committee. So we were called in on, Wednesday of last week to review the building. And if you look at my photographs there, I can show you this was the condition of the building when we came on site. And as you can see, the failure of the building was the result of failure of the masonry at two locations between the window and door at this point here and the roof at that point there, because there's a window here and a door below it. So that was the weakest point on the west wall. And so that masonry failed, and the entire wall swung out to the west and broke off at this point here. But in doing so, it destabilized the remaining third floor portion of the masonry up here. You can see by the shadow here how much it's moved to the north, and it twisted the entire corner of the building. Now, if you go and click, I guess. Okay. So, this is quite dark here, but if you look here, one of the things that we became very concerned about was in the rubble pile at the bottom of where the wall had collapsed. All the stones are individual stones. No two stones were held together by mortar. And so that tells us, and also it was visual, just by reviewing the wall, that there is no mortar left in the masonry. It's basically a house of cards, this building right now. And so there's no horizontal mortar, there's no mortar in the core. And the only thing that's holding this together is the surface tension created by the improper mortar that was actually used on the face of the building, which caused the problem in the first place. But that is actually what's holding the building up right now. We have two diagrams here that are attached that show you how a rubble wall is built. And this is a convention for the construction of rubble walls for 3,000 years. And so when you have a rubble wall, you have the exterior stone, you have a sort of an interior wall, and you have a rubble core, which is a mixture of stone and mortar. In order to be able to restore even a badly deteriorated masonry wall, you need, what's critical is I need at least 60% of the mortar to still be intact in the horizontal joints, because that's what keeps the stone up. You're also relying on some of the mortar in the core. We can have lots of voids, but as long as we have a little bit of mortar in the core to sort of hold the thing together, then we can do serious conservation work to restore the wall. We also require to have some a reasonably good condition on the inner wide, and usually, except for maybe a few feet at the top where water's been getting in, that's what you would expect. This is an example of a wall which is already in failure mode, where you're losing a lot of the mortar on the interior of the wall. What actually is in existence in this building is I have maybe a half an inch of mortar on the exterior of these stones, but I have no mortar back in here.
I have no mortar in the center. All I have is loose rubble and the sand that all the mortar is leached out of the sand. So what you get over 20, 30 years is the moisture coming in from the outside and continues to wash the sand down the wall. And so what you have is at the top of the wall, you have lots of voids and stones, but as you get lower down the wall, it's all heavy, loose sand, and it's been forced down continually by rain. And so the collapse occurred late day on Tuesday after record rainfall all day on Tuesday. And so I believe that was the sort of straw that broke the camel's back. But the other concern, and you can see it if you go inside the building, and we have some photographs here to show it, is that there is heavy deterioration of the mortar on the backside of the inner wide. So the way the wall is now, we have stabilized it, and I'll just go through the photographs to show you that. We've stabilized it in the respect that we don't feel that there's any more imminent collapse. But there is no way for a mason to go in and restore this masonry without taking it down. And an example of that is we've just completed 93 Sparks, Canada Four Corners on Metcalfe and Wellington. And there we had to take down the east wall because it too, just like this wall, was split in two. And there's no way for the masons to safely restore this without taking it down. So I'll quickly just go through my photographs. Yeah, okay. So you can see here, this was what we were faced with looking at the southwest corner, and you can see the way it's split in two after the collapse, like it's totally separated in the center, and most of the inner wide at the top, the piece that's hanging loose, has actually gone. We got a chance to go up and have a look at the roof, and this is a 4-ply tar and gravel roof. They haven't done those in 30 years, and this one, it's had some repairs here which have all failed. There's holes in the roof here. There's also holes in the roof over and along there above the wall. So there's been water coming in and coming down into this wall for a long, long time. This one is hard to see, but basically what we're looking at here is the wood at the corners of the roof is all decayed. And this is the section of wall that we were concerned about, and you can see the way you can see the amount of movement that had already occurred. And there's no stone around the corner here because at the front wall the stone stops here, so there was nothing here to hold this stone. And stone masonry with no mortar in it is basically you're playing a game of Jenga. So our method to make this safe was we actually got the machine from the demo, and he removed the metalwork here, and he just pinched these stones here and moved the machine laterally by 2 inches, and the entire remaining west wall collapsed in about 30 seconds. And that's how dangerous this building is. That's another picture of the piece that was hanging out on the west wall. This is looking at it from the south side, and so because the whole southwest corner had rotated, you can see if you look closely that there are cracks, major cracks down along the wall on this side and all the way down here. The reason that we asked for the machine to go in is that we couldn't put anyone near the building because they'd get killed. So the machine was able to do the work from a distance, but the machine that we brought in could basically, like he was able to reach inside the building and take out a bookshelf and leave it on the road. That's how finely this machine could work. But we were afraid if we didn't have it and the corner collapsed, it would pull the entire front face with it. So we were able to, with the machine, demolish the west side first and then pick these stones out. So what we were able to do in the end, and our objective was to reach the edge of the window on this side
so that we would have secure masonry past that, and then step back so that we could leave the lintel over the large window here. And that's what we were able to achieve. So you can see here, this was after we had just taken down the southwest corner, and this is the reason why we had to go past the first window, because the portion of masonry between the corner and the first window had completely separated, and we had to take that out. Another thing to pay attention here, and why we didn't take down any of the second floor while we were doing emergency demolition, is that the second floor joists sit on a continuous wood member here that's built into the wall, and if we tried to pull any of the second floor joists out, we would have separated the wall and collapsed the whole front of the building. So this is pretty much as we've left the building now. Is that we have we've successfully gone to the edge of the window, and then we've stepped it down here, and we feel that for the short term the building is secure, but we strongly recommend that this building not be standing by the time the snow flies, because the snow will bring it down. The wood roof is rotten, is completely rotten. We took out a portion of it here. It's not even safe for somebody to walk on the roof right now. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything in this. So this is an aerial view again before we did the collapse. This is a closer look at the holes on the far side of the roof. Yeah, and there you see, there was some attempt at masonry repointing in the last couple of years, but all the mason did was plaster over the top of the outer half-inch mortar, which is on the wall, and that is absolutely of no value to the restoration. Okay, thank you.
So to conclude this presentation, as this building is of heritage value, Heritage staff will meet with the owner in the coming weeks to explore his intentions as he complies with the timeline set up by Building Code Services. Recognizing that it has been a week since this unfortunate event has happened and the property owner is currently seized with insurance, engineering, and legal matters, and understanding that he's still determining next steps, it is too soon to make a determination on whether this building will be fully restored, a portion saved, or the entire site demolished. It is Heritage staff's view that every reasonable effort must be made to explore how this building or portions of the building could be conserved. This must, however, be weighed against Mr. Cook's advice, the impact that the building in this current state has to the streetscape and the property owner's own plans. We await further engineering review from the owner and have at our discretion the ability to undertake additional engineering study to complement Mr. Cook's work. Approvals to alter or demolish the building will come before Built Heritage Subcommittee in an application, and as well will go to Planning Committee and Council for approval, unless any emergency arises that requires the discretion from the Chief Building Code official. A few members of the public have asked, and yes, I can confirm that photogrammetry of the building has been undertaken on the southwest corner that was prior to it being demolished, and additional historical recording of the entire building will be undertaken as a proactive measure. In closing, I want to acknowledge that this is a very unfortunate incident on what has been an otherwise very successful ongoing initiative by the city to proactively monitor and protect our vacant or seemingly vacant heritage buildings. In the early days of this incident, staff have been exploring ways in which we can learn from this experience to further safeguard our heritage assets, recognizing that these assets are mostly in private property hands. Today, I can advise that within the coming weeks, we will be engaging an engineering firm to visit all remaining 23 of our vacant heritage buildings to determine whether or not engineering reports are warranted on these buildings. This initiative will also provide additional training to our staff who are charged with completing ongoing investigations. These investigations, as you can appreciate, are challenging inspections to undertake as they are only visual in nature and are of very complex buildings. Our hope is that this added effort will complement the work that we are doing and ensure that we continue to proactively protect our city's built heritage. So with that, Chair, we've concluded our presentation and we're happy to answer any questions members may have. Great. Thank you for the presentation. I know Member Smallwood has questions, and I'm sure others do as well. So, Member Small.
Yes, I'd like to ask John Cook a couple of questions. So just a couple of things about it are concern me, but do you think, was it obvious, or and perhaps this is an unfair question, but do you think it would have been fairly obvious had you inspected the building before the collapse that it was at least in danger from your
and something I said, while we were looking at the building, if I had inspected this building before, I would have said it needed major conservation. Once I seen the collapse, I think that if we had started conservation, once we had started removing the mortar, we would have been into a major takedown and rebuild. Because the building right now, the way it is it's just like, what we found, as I said, at 93 Sparks. If the outer wide and inner wide are separated and there's no mortar in the horizontal joints, then it's a danger to the masons.
So I noticed, at least it appeared to me in some photographs I saw of the building historically, that there was a steel plate on that wall. And you didn't mention that in your report, but
the steel plate is a tie. It's a tie back and front, but that steel plate, and I know Stantec made reference to it, but the fact that you have no mortar in the joints, all that steel plate is holding one stone on the west side to one stone on the east side, and it has no other value.
The reason I was raising it was because it appeared to me that the presence of that steel plate, which appeared to me to be old, was an indication that an engineer had been looking at this before, that there was a bulge already, and I don't know how old this was, but that there had clearly been you don't add a steel plate to the building because you have an extra piece of steel kicking around. You do it because somebody's told you.
So in this case, it is possible, but it's fairly common to see these steel ties through the building. So, but the nature of this building is the structure spans from north to south. So the joists are embedded in the wall on the north and south. But the east and west, as you can see if you just look at the picture there, as you can see there, the structure goes parallel to the wall, but the only anchorage in that direction is that steel tie. So that was its function, was to provide lateral support at the floor level.
Right. You mentioned several times about the holes in the roof, and that there was water infiltration, certainly in between the two wides of stone. Is it your belief that water was also infiltrating into the interior of the building and would have been visible inside the building?
I can't understand why not, because it was, seriously, and the rot on the roof, all the deck along this side was all rotten. It's easy for me to say because I can, I joke that I can drive around the glebe and I can write reports on buildings without even getting out of my car because I know what I look for, But if a person doesn't know what to look for and doesn't understand stone masonry, then they can easily make the wrong decisions. Looking at this building now, it needed major restoration about 40 years ago.
Well, I've known a video for many years, and he was shaking his head and going, "No," behind you as you were speaking. So obviously he's indicating that he didn't know there was water leaking inside.
Yeah, and he was living in the building, so I don't know. It may have been running down, but it was definitely running into the masonry.
I have no doubt that the owner I've known him for a long time, and have no doubt that his heart was in the right place.
Yes.
But this clearly is a case of a building that was desperately in need of work.
Which goes to my point. If you don't understand the stone masonry, it's quite easy to make that, and I can understand why people make those decisions.
Right. The other question I had was just with respect to the masonry. I know that in the report I read that masonry work, repointing had been done, but you pointed out was done incorrectly with Portland.
Whoever did this, it's a philosophy of 100 years of tuck pointing. Tuck pointing was considered, and people used Portland mortar instead of lime mortar. So what they did is the Portland mortar, they only went in half an inch. They call it tuck pointing. But what was more important was to restore the mortar full depth into
to the wall, which nobody did. And that's why I've been in business for the last 25 years.
So my question, I guess, to the city was, is that given the nature of this building and given that the city had instructed this work had been done, is it not normal practice that the city would have made sure that the owner was aware of how they should have? Did the city not make the owner aware? Because clearly the owner was trying to do something. Were they not informed of what they should be doing and how they should be doing it properly? When this, as I see back in March 2017, was there no communication with the owner explaining what should have been done and how it should have been done, so that at that time perhaps different steps could have been taken?
Mr. Chair, really, the officer that originally took on this case in 2017 has since retired, so I don't have very much information from the investigating officer at that time. It is my understanding, though, that there wasn't very much conversation between the property owner and the investigating officer, unfortunately.
But that doesn't answer my concern. I find it very difficult to believe that the owner was told to do this work. The owner went and did it. Clearly some work was done, but there doesn't seem to be any further action taken by the city in March 2017 of a more urgent nature, perhaps, because this, I think, made the problem worse by what happened rather than making it better. So I'm just concerned. I think we all want to learn from this, and I would like to know what could have been done or should have been done so that this wouldn't have gone on the way it did.
In my opinion, what could have been done at this point would have been to follow up with the structural engineer's report to have a better look at those masonry walls and those joints to ensure that they were repointed correctly.
I see number, I think, Vice Chair, you were first.
Yes, as a practicing heritage architect, I'm always sad to see failures like this, and they often, for a building that has been there for so long, reflect lack of stewardship, and as John Cook said, lack of understanding what the asset is. And I was very pleased to hear Court Curry, you're saying that this case study is going to trigger some better training of inspection staff to know what to look for and to provide early warnings to owners and to the community about buildings that are in physical jeopardy, not just for the heritage attributes, but for life safety as well. So I think that this is one positive outcome to this drama, but nevertheless, it's disheartening to see that, because the building industry is millennia old, and we have learned things from experience. Cathedrals were built and cathedrals collapsed, but then we built better cathedrals from learning from experience. I think that there should probably be a small handbook or something published on the city's website that reports the findings of this case study, so that it might be out there for others that are unaware of the vulnerability of aspects of the property, and they might learn from that. Because I think the educational experience, educational program is part of the Heritage Conservation Program. Just a last sidebar to this. In seeing this wall collapse, I'm reminded of a similar wall which borders my own property in the soon-to-be Heritage Conservation District in Sandy Hill. And the city has put an order to the Côte d'Ivoire Embassy at 9 Marlborough over 6 months ago, and nothing has been done. So there's a stone wall as we speak in real time right now that is experiencing jeopardy, and the city has no ability to enforce the repair of that wall. And I think that that should be taken into account in the retraining program and the procedures that are looked at as to how to protect not just the heritage but life safety. So, Mr. Chair, I appreciate this briefing, and I appreciate the way in which the city has acted quickly on this particular case study, and it would be helpful to have future reports on this. For instance, report on whether or not, if the Cook recommendation to demolish the building is actually the choice that is made by the owner or enforced by the city, then what will replace this building in the future? Will the pieces be conserved? Who will pay for that? So I think that's something that we would be interested in if an application to demolish comes to the Built Heritage Committee, for Planning Committee Council recommendation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKenny.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Cook, for your report. Much appreciated. This is a tragedy on many fronts, and to see a building like this collapse outside of the danger that it poses to the street level and to residents or anybody who happen to be near it or in it, to lose, or the potential now to lose such a significant piece of our heritage really is quite tragic. I can't help but go back to buildings like Somerset House, which we saw a wall come down, not in the same manner, but as a result of damage, mostly caused by rain, because it's an open space again, and this has been going on now for over a decade, and probably it's a different structure. I understand that, of brick as opposed to stone, but it's open to the elements, and we've seen before that, and we continue to see that, especially with Somerset House, it certainly is demolition by neglect. So I guess my question to staff is, I'm happy to hear that we're going to be hiring a firm to do inspections on our vacant heritage properties. I'd like to hear from you, what some of the resolutions may be. I think back just in the last couple of weeks, we heard out of the City of Toronto that council there is in the process of expropriating two heritage hotels that have been neglected, and in that case, sorry, I left my kid home alone today. She keeps calling. In that case, they are, expropriating them, and they're going to use them to build some affordable housing. Now, I know that that's not the purview of this committee, the affordability part, but at what point will, from staff's perspective, and I know it's a council decision, but at what point will you decide that we need to take a different path? I mean, we've gone down this. We've sent out staff to look at buildings. We know which buildings are falling down. We know which ones are being neglected. And so I'd just like to hear from staff if there will be any consideration given to taking a different path with some of the owners who are neglecting their buildings, and I'm thinking particularly right now about Somerset House, in terms of the city expropriating and doing the right thing by fixing up some of these buildings.
So certainly, Councillor, if you look at it from a carrot and stick approach, on the stick side, in the last 2 years, we certainly have increased our enforcement activities. We now have a full-time dedicated bylaw officer that is inspecting these vacant heritage properties and other vacant properties, and we are aggressively issuing orders and summonses to ensure that work is being done. We monitor the list of 24 buildings. We're out there every 3 months, checking each of the buildings and completing an inspection. So certainly on the inspection and enforcement side, we have increased our initiatives substantially. We're also right now looking at other legislative tools that we may have. A lot of these vacant buildings or buildings that are in somewhat interim solutions where they've been braced have encroachments into the street, and so we were reviewing our encroachment bylaw as well to see if there's a financial mechanism through there that we can disincentivize long-term temporary encroachments that become long-term rather. So those are the two ongoing initiatives, a legislative review and an enforcement initiative on the stick side. On the carrot side as well, we are reviewing the tools that other municipalities across Canada are using to incentivize redevelopment of vacant or underutilized buildings, and so doing best practice research on that at the moment, and certainly we'll advise council in due course if there are appropriate tools that the city should be using.
Okay, well, I do look forward to that. I think that at some point it will have to be a political decision, and I would not be as the councillor responsible for the area where Somerset House, for example, is located. Certainly, I think that at some point we'll have to make that political decision, and I'll have to consider when I will bring that to the table. Thank you.
Councillor Leeper. Thanks, Chair. I do think it is important today to recognize some of the personnel who were involved. I was on site within about half an hour or 45 minutes of the walls collapse, and I do want to thank the Ottawa firefighters, the Ottawa Fire Service, Ottawa Police, the paramedics. This could have been a lot worse than it was. Thankfully, there were no injuries. It's a busy sidewalk. We know that Mr. Sabusa was in the building shortly before its collapse, and I do have reason to feel very, very confident today in the response capacity of our first responders. It was quickly secured, made safe, and I think that we would have been in a position to deal with even more tragic circumstances. I also want to thank John Cook for being on site. Stantec was retained on site very, very quickly. And then the demolition firm, Priestley Demolition Firm, if I may just give a quick shout out to their operator. Mr. Cook was describing the finesse with which that operator was working. It was quite something to see. A lot of people, Mark Spiro with City Traffic, this had a long and frankly difficult impact on our roads for transit users. But I am very thankful to all the city and third-party personnel who were involved. One of my questions that I've had for the past several days, and I don't know if we can answer it today, property standards officers going to look at buildings. We have engineers who will be going out to do an assessment of some of our vacant properties. Should we not be sending engineers on a consistent basis, rather than relying on property standards inspectors to deal with what might be structural issues?
Mr. Chair, at this point, Councillor, when a visual inspection is done and if there is any deterioration of mortar in these types of structures, I've already provided direction to the officer investigating these that definitely order the engineer's report, and I would support them in that if there is any doubt, order a structural engineer's report and ensure that remedial action is taken.
It will be important that your officers know that you have their back, that if they have any cause at all to feel that there may be a structural issue, that they should issue that order to have a structural engineer's report produced, and that they'll be backed up by every level of management up the chain, because I can certainly see how somebody might not want to rock the boat. Somebody may say, I don't have the expertise to make that determination, to make that call. I'm imposing a cost on a property owner, and to let it slide. I do think it's really critical, if we're not going to send engineers out ourselves to make those assessments, that your officers know, err on the side of requesting that engineering report.
And those conversations have already happened with the officer.
Okay. Because, as I say, this turned out not to have any injury, loss of life, but it could have turned out much differently. I do want to understand the portion of the presentation that was made by John, Mr. Buck. So by August 7th, the property owner is going to have to provide an engineer's design on interim bracing and shoring for the entire building, implement all required interim stabilization measures, and provide an engineer's report of interim stabilization measures. So within a few days, what does that mean in English? We have 3 walls that are standing up right now. What does it mean for those 3 walls?
Yeah, in plain English, so we already have Mr. Cook's recommendation that says quite clearly that the building in its present form is stable, and that should be revisited at the absolute latest prior to either frost effects or snow. Okay. So we do have that. I think what has to be appreciated here is that these directives actually predated the emergency action that was taken. So these directives were given the day after the collapse, but before we did the interim demolition. So nonetheless, though, the order does remain in effect. So yes, the expectation is that right now, Mr. Spreece is retaining his own engineer to take a look at the situation and to either complement Mr. Cook's findings or to take issue with them, potentially at least get back to us with what are their findings. Does this building need any further interim stabilization? If yes, then let's see it implemented, and if no, then let's move on.
We had Mr. Cook's determinations, recommendations. By August 20th, we're expecting the building owner's engineer to actually have undertaken any necessary demolition work. If I understand Mr. Cook's findings properly, Mr. Cook would find that it's going to need to be dismantled in order to be safe. Why are we not just proceeding with that now?
Ultimately, it's not our property. Okay, ultimately this is Mr. Spreece's building. However, the city, Building Code Services, under the direction of the emergency order, had to take emergency action on behalf of the property owner. And quite possibly, the property owners aren't typically resourced to act as quickly as we can in these emergency situations. They're generally not in the demolition business. Potentially they couldn't have rallied the demolition contractor that quick, and I think Mr. Cook's presentation quite clearly showed how urgent it was that corner of the building came down immediately, thus the emergency order. That said, it is still Mr. Spreece's property, so the ball is still in his court in terms of the words of the originally issued order, the expectation that he come forward with the engineering. And just to be clear, it was the city, Building Code Services, who did retain Mr. Cook, largely for his experience and knowledge in this domain.
You don't expect any outcome from the owner's engineer any different to say that, in fact, the walls can stay standing?
I think it's hard to, it would be hard to speculate, but, I find the findings of Mr. Cook's report to be quite clear.
Okay. The timeline is relatively quick. By August 20th, any necessary demolition is going to have to be done. How does that get paid for? How can we ensure that that work gets done? The owner, to your point, may not have the resources to undertake I don't know how expensive a demolition. How can we ensure that the work does get done in timely fashion, and perhaps legal can weigh in with the measures that we have to absolutely ensure that, particularly for the public safety?
Well, I can take the first crack at that, if you don't mind, Councillor. So, by virtue of the fact that these directives have been done under an order to remedy an unsafe building, the city does have the ability to undertake the work itself on behalf of the owner and then tax roll the costs. That being said, we are cognizant that these timelines are quite tight, respecting the processes that would have to be followed, whether it be heritage or site plan or demolition control, etc. There's a number of processes, so it would be, provided the building is stable and we have a bit of a timeout here,
this would allow potentially Mr. Spreesa to go through the process. We're not going to demolish his building, if he doesn't abide by these directives by the 20th of August. But that being said, if there's some feet dragging and whatnot, we could take the next steps, whether it be pursuing charges, which we don't necessarily intend to do, or taking any action required to make the situation safe.
Is it our chief building inspector or chief building officer who can make that call? Does that require...
Correct. I mean, there's nothing that says that another emergency order can't be issued if necessary in order for us to act similarly to what we did. So, for example, if tomorrow, we get, heaven forbid, we get news that, maybe the facade is demonstrating some outward distress or what have you, then there's absolutely nothing preventing us from going through the loop again. That being said, that's not what anybody wants. It is Mr. Spreesa's building, and so the expectation is that he will be making these decisions in terms of, can the building be saved? And his engineering team, of course, can the building be saved? Can a portion of it be saved? Does it have to be shored further? Is it good as is? So it's quite a fluid situation, and it is acknowledged that these deadlines are quite tight. They were set quite tight, partly because it was done the day that the order was drafted and issued the day after, the event itself, so it was quite chaotic. But also, we want to be able to adequately hold the owner's feet to the fire to say, let's get this thing, dealt with, or at least braced up adequately, if that's even possible. We don't know some of these answers at this point.
Okay. The most likely scenario sees the building demolished or deconstructed somehow, with the potential to rebuild maybe some walls, maintain a facade. Is that a decision that council can impose upon a private property owner? Is that a mechanism that we have? Let's say it's demolished under emergency order. What power do we have to force some kind of a reconstruction in a pragmatic way?
So, Councillor, I don't want to speculate on what may or may not be able to be possible, particularly as Mr. Buck said, it is in the owner's court right now to determine next steps. As Mr. Buck said, too, those dates are the dates the Chief Building Code official ordered shortly after the incident happened. However, Mr. Spreesa now has to consider his options and apply to Heritage for any demolition or alteration to this building, or reconstruction for that matter, and that is a matter that is not delegated to staff. That will be coming before this committee and planning committee and council. Based on Mr. Cook's advice that by the time frost hits, a decision has to be made, you can be assured that we'll be back before this committee this fall with an application on the matter.
Okay, that's good. You know what, I will leave it there. I thank you for the in-depth presentation you've made today. And I really do want to thank all of the city staff who have been involved, the contractors who have been involved. It was very chaotic on the scene, and your professionalism across the organization is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Member Smallwood wanted to ask a follow-up question.
Yes, Mr. Curry made some comments about the looking into best practices, and you mentioned CARET, which I'm really happy to hear about, end of the equation. I think this is a really, really, really important time that we take a look at this. Partly from what Mr. Cook had mentioned, and I think this really illustrates that this isn't like owning a normal building. A building like this has very, very specific requirements of what has to be done, and failure to do them can have catastrophic results, as we have seen. You didn't mention something that exists already, which is there is a provision in the province of Ontario to allow municipalities to give tax rebates or municipal tax rebates. And you had mentioned specifically about incentives for redevelopment. I would suggest what we should be looking at, and perhaps you are, is just the ability to give owners of properties such as this either an ability to reduce the amount of property tax they pay when that amount of money is being used for regular maintenance, which is over and above what a normal house would face. This was a critical time and a critical example of how important this could be. These buildings do cost a lot more, and the burden clearly now, a benefit falls to the whole community, but the burden falls specifically on the owner of the property. So will you be looking specifically at municipal tax relief, and is that something that we as a committee have to get direction on, or will you already be doing that? Thank you.
Chair, I can advise that certainly we are reviewing best practices of municipalities across Canada, particularly focusing on the Ontario dynamic. Hamilton, Toronto are doing fantastic things with respect to property tax deferral, development charge deferral, similar to, predicated on a CIP program, like we have a brownfields program here. So we're currently undertaking best practices review on that. So I don't think any direction is required. Certainly, when the time comes that we believe we have some recommendations, we'll certainly be bringing those forward to Council for consideration.
Another question?
Thank you. It's just a quick question about, I know the dates that you mentioned, but just in terms of, and we don't know the outcome, demolition, but the whole building's interior is completely exposed right now. We're having a lot of torrential downpours, and I'm just wondering if there's anything temporary tarping or...
Yeah, one of the directives actually in the emergency order, which was eliminated for the purposes of clarity, was to tarp the building to protect it from weather. Mr. Cook has advised, and he said so earlier today, it wouldn't be safe to have a worker, for example, on the roof in its current condition. However, the direction has been provided to Mr. Spree so that he does have the opportunity to take this on in some capacity, whether it be, over the third floor or what have you, to protect some of the articles. So this is something that I understand he's currently exploring. However, the directive is to do so under the supervision of an engineer, as well as being fully aware of Mr. Cook's analysis of the situation as well. So can it be done? Possibly under the direction of an engineer, very carefully. So yes, these conversations were had with Mr. Spree.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much to staff for that most useful and detailed briefing. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, we don't allow public delegations, but yeah. You know what, sorry, I have to follow the procedures. I'm not going to allow you to speak, but I'll come and speak to you afterwards, and we can certainly pass through any information, but I do have to follow the rules, and I'm happy to come and speak to you after this meeting. So I'm going to return to the agenda, and we have no more substantive items. I wanted to draw attention to the fact that under technical circulation, there is circulation for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for 552 Booth Street. And other than that, I think that's it. Any notices of motion for the next meeting? Any inquiries? Great. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for taking a break from your summer, and we'll see you on Thursday, 13th of September.